By the time night came, doing nothing had worn me out more than work ever did. I was not built for standing still. I did not know what to do with empty hours or idle hands. Give me a stack of dishes, a hallway to scrub, a stove to clean, laundry to carry, and I could move through the day without thinking too much. Work kept my mind quiet. Orders were simple. Chores had a beginning and an end. But that day, no one had given me anything. No breakfast prep. No laundry. No floors. No pots. No linens. Nothing. For most of the girls in the slave quarters, that should have been a blessing. They hated the work. I had seen their faces fall whenever Madame Melinda snapped out another command. I was different. That was probably why I made such a good slave. I liked being useful. I liked knowing exactly where to stand, what to carry, what to scrub, what to fix. It was easier than wondering what would happen if I stopped. And today, I had stopped. Because the king was here. The king. Not an alpha. Not some visiting noble from a neighboring pack. The king of every werewolf in the country had come to inspect our pack, and everyone had been moving like one wrong breath might bring the walls down. He had announced months ago that he would be touring every pack in the United States, making sure they were properly governed and protected. Our alpha had taken the news badly. Madame Melinda had taken it worse. For the past month, every slave in the house had been worked until our backs ached and our fingers cracked. I had not complained. The others had. I could not blame them. They remembered freedom. They remembered beds that belonged to them, homes they were not beaten for leaving, names people used instead of numbers. I remembered none of that. I had been in this house for as long as memory reached. My first clear memory was not of a mother or a father or a birthday. It was of kneeling on a bathroom floor with a scrub brush in my hand, my knees aching against the tile while a voice above me told me I was too slow. I did not know how I had come here. I only knew I had never left. The king terrified me, though I had never seen him. Everyone said he was the most powerful creature alive. A hybrid, the only one of his kind. Half werewolf, half vampire, made that way after a vampire bit him when he was young. That alone would have been enough to frighten anyone, but his bloodline carried something else too. Fire. Real fire. Elemental power passed through his family for generations. I had heard whispers that he could call flames into his hand with no more than a thought. So when we were ordered to remain hidden in the cellar quarters during his tour of the pack house, no one argued. The slave quarters held 15 narrow beds. There were 16 of us. I slept on the floor. At 20, I was the youngest, so the floor had always been mine. It did not bother me much. The others had known real mattresses before being sentenced here. Most of them were human women who had committed crimes serious enough to be sold into servitude for a set number of years. I had never known any life but this one, which made the hard floor less cruel somehow. I could not miss comfort I had never had. That day, though, I wished I had somewhere to sit. I had dressed in my uniform at dawn and gone to stand in my usual corner, where I slept at night. Hours passed. Then more. I leaned the back of my head against the wall and tried not to shift too much, because my feet had started to hurt and the stone floor was damp and dirty. If I sat, I might soil my uniform. If I changed back into my nightgown, Madame Melinda might call us out without warning. So I stood. The other girls lay on their beds, silent because we were not permitted to speak without permission. Some slept. Some stared blankly at the ceiling. One of them stuck out her tongue and tried to touch the tip of her nose, which might have made me smile on a different day. I did not ask to sit on anyone's bed. They might have let me. They might not have. Either way, asking felt wrong. I was beneath them. They were older. Most were over 40. They had lived lives before this place, and when their years of punishment ended, they might have lived again. I had been born into service as far as anyone cared, and I would probably die in it too unless Madame Melinda decided to sell me somewhere worse. My hands twisted together in front of my skirt. I wanted my chores. The longer I stood there, the more my stomach knotted. I knew we had been ordered to stay out of sight. I knew the point was to keep the king from seeing us during his tour. Still, unfinished work made my skin crawl. Unfinished work meant punishment. Even when the order not to work came from above, some part of me expected to be blamed for every dusty shelf and unwashed dish. By the time Madame Melinda finally stormed into the room, the sun had gone down. "Get up," she snapped. Every girl in the room jerked. "The king's ball is tomorrow," she said, looking over us with a smile that made my shoulders tighten. "Everything will be spotless." Relief hit me so sharply I nearly swayed. Work. Finally. Several hours later, that relief had worn thin. I had just finished scrubbing the 6th bathroom on the lower floor. My back throbbed, my fingers were raw, and my eyes burned with the kind of exhaustion that made the world feel soft around the edges. I allowed myself one breath, then carried my bucket toward the last kitchen on my list. It was the 3rd kitchen I had cleaned that night. It was also the last thing standing between me and sleep, though even that was too hopeful. When I stepped inside and saw every counter covered with dirty dishes, trays, pans, and half-filled cups, my heart sank. Of course there were more dishes than usual. The entire pack house had been celebrating the king's arrival. Even the lower floors, where the less important pack members stayed, had been used harder than normal. Grease streaked the counters. Crumbs covered the floor. Plates were stacked wherever there had been space. I looked at the clock. 4 in the morning. My shoulders dropped. Breakfast started at 6. There would be no sleep. That was not rare, but it still hurt to accept. I tied my apron tighter, moved as quietly as I could, and began gathering dishes for the sink. The last thing I needed was to wake someone. If a pack member came down angry because I had made too much noise, the punishment would be bad enough to leave me stumbling through breakfast half-blind. I turned on the faucet just enough to work without splashing. Plate after plate. Bowl after bowl. Scrape, rinse, wash, stack. I was halfway through when I felt someone enter the room. My whole body locked. The water ran over my hands. My breath stopped. My heart dropped so hard it felt as though it landed in my stomach. No. No, no, no. I had woken someone. I shut the faucet off with shaking fingers, dropped to my knees, and bowed my head to the tile before I could see who it was. My palms pressed flat to the floor. My spine curved low in the proper position of respect and submission. Footsteps approached. Bare feet. Pajama pants. Male. Large. Very large. I stared at the tiles and tried not to tremble too visibly. From the size of his feet alone, I knew he was not one of the lower-ranked wolves who sometimes came through at night. This man was bigger. Stronger. The air around him seemed to press against my skin. "Stupid girl," the voice in my head whispered. I hated that voice. It had been with me since childhood, tucked behind my thoughts, always ready to spit out what I already feared was true. Stupid, careless, useless girl. The man stopped in front of me. He said nothing. I could hear him breathing, each inhale rough and heavy. That somehow frightened me more than shouting would have. Wolves became dangerous when they were tired, especially male wolves. They needed sleep. Everyone knew that. If I had dragged him from bed with the sound of dishes, I would be lucky to leave the kitchen only bruised. His scent was unfamiliar. Royal pack. My fear sharpened. The visitors had been given rooms upstairs, on the highest floor, where slaves were forbidden. A royal wolf had no reason to be down here. No reason at all. He could kill me with one strike. He stepped closer. I swallowed the sound rising in my throat. "Stand up, please." His voice was deep and controlled, not rough the way most wolves' voices were. Smooth, almost too smooth, but with command beneath every word. My body obeyed before my mind caught up. I rose quickly, keeping my head lowered and my eyes on the floor. "Please do not kill me. Please do not kill me. Please do not kill me." His gaze moved over me. I felt it like touch. Shame heated my face. I had not been careful with my appearance. Why would I have been? It was 4 in the morning. My uniform was probably wrinkled and dirty. Strands of hair had fallen loose from my bun. I had not had time to bathe. I could only imagine what a royal wolf must think of me. He inhaled slowly through his nose. Memorizing my scent, maybe. Preparing to report me to Madame Melinda. That would be better than him punishing me himself, I told myself. Madame Melinda could hurt me, but she could not do the kind of damage a wolf his size could. A low growl rolled from him. I nearly flinched. "Look at me," he said. My pulse jumped. It was a test. It had to be. Madame Melinda had done it before. She would order us to look at her, then strike us when we obeyed. Afterward, she would remind us that slaves were not worthy of meeting the eyes of anyone above them. We were human. Weak. Dirty. Beneath notice unless we were being corrected. This royal wolf must have wanted to see how well our pack trained its servants. I kept my gaze down. He growled again, louder this time. Look at me. Now. Fear made my thoughts scatter. Was I supposed to obey the words or the rule? Which mistake would cost less? I did not know. I could not know. I swallowed, my throat painfully dry. And may I have permission to speak, sir? My voice sounded terrible. Small. Thin. I could not remember the last time I had spoken to anyone who had not demanded an answer. A pause. Then, yes. Relief flickered through me. He had not hit me for asking. Maybe that meant I had chosen correctly. I tried to keep my voice steadier. Slaves of my rank are not permitted to look at anyone, sir. Not under any circumstances. I have been taught the rule well. I promise. I thought that would satisfy him. I was wrong. A roar of anger tore from him so suddenly I stumbled backward. The sound filled the kitchen, shaking through the counters and walls. My hip struck the stove, and pain burst through my side where my ribs had been cracked in yesterday's punishment. A whimper slipped out before I could stop it. The man moved toward me. Look at me, he shouted. My whole body shook. I was trapped between the stove and the furious royal wolf, and every awful possibility spun through my mind. I lifted one trembling hand to wipe away a tear before he saw it. Wolves hated human tears. Madame Melinda said tears were manipulation. Weakness. Disrespect. My voice broke. The last time I had looked someone directly in the eyes, I had been 7. Madame Melinda slapped me so hard black spots filled my vision. My left eye had been swollen for weeks. This man could do worse without effort. Shit, he muttered suddenly. I sucked in a frightened breath. The word sounded strange from someone like him. He stepped back. Then he let out a long breath, as if trying to force himself under control. I am sorry, he said, and the words confused me so badly I nearly looked up by accident. That was too harsh. My anger is not for you. I did not mean to scare you. He paused. Will you please look at me? I give you my word that no harm will come to you for it. I stayed frozen. A promise from a wolf meant something. A promise from someone powerful should have meant more. But rules meant punishment, and punishment always came eventually. Please do not cry, he said, softer now. Goddess, I truly did not intend to frighten you. I only want to see your eyes. Nothing bad will happen. That only made the tears fall faster. I wiped them away quickly, horrified that he had noticed. I was humiliating myself. Worse, I was humiliating the pack that had fed me, housed me, and given me a place in this world. They asked only that I work and obey. Today, I had failed at both. With no other choice left, I broke the rule I had carried since childhood. Slowly, I raised my head. His eyes were turquoise. Not blue. Not green. Something between the two, bright and clear and impossible to look away from. The moment my gaze met his, the kitchen seemed to fall out of reach. The fear did not vanish exactly, but something warmer rose beneath it, something that moved through me like sunlight after years underground. My breath caught. The ache in my side faded. The exhaustion in my bones loosened. For one strange, impossible second, I felt as though I belonged somewhere. With him. Mine, he growled. I did not understand the word. Not the way he said it. I only knew I did not want him to look away. We stood there, trapped in silence, staring at one another as if the rest of the house had ceased to exist. Then 2 more presences rushed into the kitchen. Growls filled the doorway. The man with turquoise eyes turned instantly. Before I could blink, he caught my sleeve and pulled me behind him so fast the room tilted. I stumbled, too startled to resist. I did not need to see who had arrived. I knew those growls. My alpha. Madame Melinda. Terror slammed back into me. I dropped to my knees so quickly my skin scraped against the tile. Pain burned through both knees, but that was nothing compared to what would happen now. I had been alone with a royal wolf. I had spoken without proper permission. I had looked at him. I had ruined everything. The man in front of me growled so hard the floor seemed to vibrate. He moved to block me completely, his legs closing together so I could see nothing beyond him. He must have been reminding me to keep my place. I lowered myself farther until my forehead touched the cold floor. My hands came up over my face, hiding the tears I could no longer stop. My body shook so badly I could not control it. I had made a mistake. A terrible one. Your Majesty, my alpha gasped. The sound of knees hitting tile followed. My heart almost stopped. Your Majesty. No. No, that could not be right. I had been speaking to the king. The king of all werewolves. The hybrid. The fire wielder. The most powerful creature alive. I should have known. Shouldn't I? Even as a human, even as a slave, I should have felt it. His power should have crushed the air from my chest. His authority should have forced me lower before he ever spoke. If he had commanded me to meet his eyes, I should have obeyed because every instinct in the world told me he outranked everything that breathed. But I had not felt crushed. I had felt warm. What is the meaning of this? The king asked. The room changed around his voice. Power filled every corner, sharp and terrible enough that even with my face to the floor, I felt it slide over my skin. My alpha sounded smaller than I had ever heard him. Your Majesty, forgive us. Your growl woke us, and we felt your wolf. Madame Melinda and I came to ensure that all was well. They had felt his wolf. I had not. Or not at first. I knew the king's strongest emotions could be felt by his people. That was part of his bond with the packs, part of why no one dared dismiss his rule. Yet while I had sensed rage, I had felt comfort. Heat. Safety. Why? Was it his fire? I tried, carefully, to open myself to whatever they had felt. It hit me at once. Power crashed over me like a wave, stealing the breath from my lungs and making my heart stutter. The king's authority was everywhere, vast and blazing and furious. He was angry. Not irritated. Not displeased. Enraged. At me. Of course it was at me. Who else had he spoken to? Who else had broken rules in front of him? A small sob slipped from my throat before I could stop it. I would not live until breakfast. The king looked down at me. I felt his gaze move over my back, hot enough to remind me again of the stories about fire in his blood. His anger grew. He stepped back until he was almost over me, the backs of his bare ankles touching the top of my bowed head. He growled at the people in front of him. I flinched. Your Majesty, my alpha said, his voice less steady now, may I ask what has angered you? The king did not answer. His breathing had gone harsh and uneven. He sounded as though he was fighting his wolf, trying to keep from shifting right there in the kitchen. He was not winning easily. If the slave has offended you, Your Majesty, I apologize, Madame Melinda said. My stomach dropped. It will be handled. Her voice sharpened. 20. Come here. My body moved before thought. I shot to my feet, ready to run to her because obedience was the only thing I knew how to offer. I did not make it one step. The king's arm swept back and locked around my waist. He pulled me against him, my front pressed to his bare back. I gasped and threw my hands out to steady myself, my palms landing against warm skin and hard muscle. He was shirtless. Only pajama bottoms hung low on his hips. At first, I thought he was burning me. Sparks raced over my hands and up my arms everywhere I touched him. Tiny bursts of heat danced across my skin, and my breath caught in shock. I thought perhaps this was punishment. Perhaps his fire would mark every place I dared touch him. But it did not hurt. It felt good. Too good. Warmth popped through me in bright little flashes, chasing away fear for half a heartbeat before I remembered who he was. I pulled my hands back quickly and tried to step away. A human slave had no right to touch a king, especially not his bare skin. His hand pressed against my spine and pushed me back into place. My face ended up between his shoulder blades. I froze. All right. He wanted me there. I would stay there. She stays exactly where she is, the king snapped at Madame Melinda. You will not touch her. Of course, Your Majesty, Madame Melinda said at once. Forgive me. No one spoke. The room became painfully quiet except for the king's breathing. I could feel the tremors running through his body, though they slowly began to ease. His hand stayed firm against my back, holding me close as if my nearness helped him somehow. After a while, his fingers pressed once, a silent command to remain still. Then his hand slid to my side and found mine. He took it. Gently. Hidden from the others by the width of his body, his fingers closed around my trembling hand. He squeezed lightly. I stared down at our joined hands, confused beyond words. I did not pull away. If touching me kept him calm enough not to kill me, he could do whatever he wanted. Your Majesty, my alpha said carefully, if I may ask again, what happened? Whoever has dishonored you will be punished severely. He meant me. Fresh tears slipped free. I tried to hold them back, but they fell anyway, landing against the king's skin. Stop crying, the voice in my head hissed. Pathetic human. Something disturbed my sleep, the king said at last. His voice was still cold, but more controlled. I will return to my room now. Tomorrow, I will remain there and I am not to be disturbed until the meeting on the 4th. Is that understood? My alpha hesitated only a fraction of a second. The ball was tomorrow night. The whole pack had prepared for it. It was meant to honor him. For the king to refuse to attend was a public insult. Of course, Your Majesty, my alpha said. The king turned. The moment his hands were no longer holding me against his back, I dropped to my knees and pressed my forehead to the kitchen floor again. This was it. He would punish me now. Maybe here, maybe upstairs. Maybe he would strike me once and leave Madame Melinda to finish the rest. I had survived many punishments, but I knew with sudden certainty that this one would end me. And somehow, knowing I had disappointed the man with the turquoise eyes made the fear worse. I shut my eyes and waited for the first blow. It did not come. He did not kick me. He did not grab my hair. He crouched in front of me and placed both hands around my waist with a gentleness I did not understand. Then he lifted me as if I weighed nothing and settled me into his arms. I went rigid. I did not breathe. I did not look up. I sat stiffly against him, my head bowed, my body shaking so hard I was ashamed of it. I am taking her with me, the king said. Yes, Your Majesty, my alpha answered immediately. Do with her as you wish. I understood then. The king wanted to handle my punishment himself. Of course he did. He could not let anyone think a slave might offend him and escape with discipline from someone else. I would be made into an example. Tortured, most likely. Killed in some way no one would forget. You deserve worse, the voice whispered. Disgrace. The king said nothing more. He simply carried me out of the kitchen and took me with him. The king went straight to the stairs after leaving the kitchen and continued up them, flight after flight, until he reached the top floor where his suite was. I wondered if he was getting tired of carrying me. Lord knows I had far too much fat on me. This is why I believed Madame Melinda had kept me on a diet my entire life. When the other slaves received soup and bread, I would only receive bread. When the other slaves would be asked to run a mile in order to keep up our strength, I was told to run 3. I had never minded the way my body looked the few times when I would get to see it in a mirror while I was cleaning a bathroom or passing my reflection in a window. But if Madame Melinda said that I needed to lose weight, then I believed her. Ugly. Fat, the voice in my head echoed. Finally, the king stopped in front of the grand entrance to the biggest suite in the entire packhouse, built specifically for the king's visits. My body shook more, knowing these would be my last few moments on earth. I hadn't even realized that I was crying until the king whispered, "Shoo. Please stop your crying. You're okay now." His voice was calm but still held enough authority to scare me shitless. He was right, I needed to stop crying. I was stronger than this. I would not spend my last moments alive crying my eyes out like a baby. Through sheer will, I was able to stop my tears through calming, deep breaths. The king said nothing else as he opened one of the 2 large doors and walked into his suite. I was tempted to look around but kept my head down. I had only heard stories about how magnificent the king's suite was, but had never been allowed in here myself. Well, until now. The king finally stopped his walking in a large bathroom, setting me down on the counter. I sucked in a breath. A bathroom was a good place to kill someone. Easy cleanup. The king paused for a second and I felt his eyes scan over me. I will be right back, he said after a moment. He left the bathroom. Once he was officially gone, I finally allowed myself to look up. The bathroom was enormous, far larger than any other bathroom in the pack house. It was even bigger than the slaves' quarters that I shared with 15 other girls. It was mostly white with gold details and, what seemed to be, hand-painted tiles. There was a huge bathtub, a shower big enough to fit 10 people, and a counter with 4 sinks that I was currently sitting on. I had never been anywhere so nice. I almost felt lucky to have my death occur in such a beautiful place. Hearing the king's footsteps approaching, I quickly hopped off the counter and went back to my knees, wincing as my bruised and bloody knees made contact with the cold tile. I brought my head to the ground, hearing Madame Melinda's voice in my head. You must always drop to your knees and bow your head at the presence of a werewolf no matter the circumstance, she had always said. Perhaps if the king saw that I was trying my hardest to be respectful, he would make my death less painful. When the king came back into the bathroom, his feet stopped in the doorway. I imagined him chuckling and telling me that nothing would save me now, not even groveling on my knees, but he didn't do that. Instead, I heard him sigh. Only a second later, I felt his hands on my waist for the 3rd time that night. I flinched away, thinking that he was trying to hit me, but he ignored me and lifted me off the ground. He placed me back on the counter gently. Please stay here. All right, little one, he asked me. He didn't remove his hands from my waist, his thumbs rubbing circles over my dress. I nodded my head once, communicating to him that I understood. I stared down at my lap. You can look at me, he said smoothly. I didn't respond. Nope. Nuh-uh. I wasn't doing anything else tonight that was against the rules. I wasn't going to fail any more tests, determined to follow the rules that I had been taught since I was young perfectly. Even though I knew it was impossible, I still had hope that I would make it out of here alive. Maybe with multiple broken bones and a barely distinguishable, bruised body, but alive nonetheless. The king stepped closer to me. You can speak to me too. It's all right, he said. I nodded once again but kept my mouth sealed shut. Weak humans like myself should not even be in the presence of the king, let alone be speaking to him. Will you tell me your name? The king asked, now running his hand up and down my thigh over my skirts. Even through the fabric, I could feel the warm, comforting sparks that appeared wherever the king touched me due to his fire powers. Confusion arose in my chest. I almost liked him touching me, as shameful as that was. No one had ever touched me in such a gentle manner. And no one's touch had ever felt so warm and comforting. Again, I did not speak. The words not worthy kept repeating in my head. He sighed again. I'm sorry, love. Know that it does not please me to do this, the king said, but it seems as though this may be the only way to get through to you. He paused for a second and I prepared myself for the worst. As your king, I command you to tell me your name. I felt the authority of his command wash over me. He was using his alpha tone on me, a tone in his voice that made anyone ranking below him immediately follow his orders. I had never quite understood the use of the tone. It had never actually worked on me the way it was supposed to. I had seen my alpha use it on others, watching in fascination as they scampered to do whatever he told them immediately after his order left his mouth. But whenever it was used on me, it just washed over me without affecting me, like a wave in the ocean. I had always assumed it was because I was human instead of a werewolf. That didn't stop me from following his order though. I am slave number 20, your majesty, I said quietly. The king growled gently, obviously not liking that response for some reason. My heart jumped. No. No, I don't want the number you were given. In fact, I don't ever want to hear you refer to yourself as such again, he spat angrily. He stepped away from me. He was breathing hard, making it plain that his wolf was trying to take over again. I want your name. The one you were given at birth. Oh, God, I had done another thing wrong. I had made him upset yet again. I could already feel the tears reappearing in my eyes. My brows knit together as I thought harder about it. That was the title I was given at birth. I had never been referred to as anything else. I had always been slave number 20. I am very sorry, your majesty, I apologized, although I didn't truly understand what I had done wrong. I genuinely do not remember ever having been called anything else. I am so sorry. So you're telling me, the king said, his tone deathly calm. He placed his hands on the counter on either side of my hips as he asked me this, leaning down so that I could feel his breath on my hair, that you have never been referred to as anything other than a fucking number your entire life? Tears were beginning to form in my eyes again at his harsh words and tone. I tried to discreetly wipe them away with my shaking hands, reminding myself that the king had just told me that to stop crying. What was wrong with me? Why wouldn't my tears stop? I shook my head. Yes. I am so sorry, why your majesty, I said in defeat. I wasn't sure why it was such a big deal to him. No one had ever had a problem calling me 20 before, but the king seemed downright furious to call me this. I must have done something wrong in not seeking out a different name that I would be called under such circumstances like this one. Thoughts surrounding names must be different in the royal kingdom. Perhaps they used letters for their slaves. I was given the number 20 as slaves are not worthy of names. I know this, sir. There is no need to test me on it as I promise I was taught this rule well. But you may call me whatever you want. I said, hopeful that would make up for it. Yes, that was good. He could give me whatever name he wanted. Please call me whatever you deem best and will please you the most. In a flash, the king was no longer in front of me, but on the other side of the bathroom. I had to keep myself from looking up in both fear and shock when I heard him growl furiously and slam his fist into the wall. Yep, I was about to die. I shrunk in on myself, trying to appear smaller while the king took his anger out on everything and anything in the bathroom. Every time he came near me, I expected him to punch me or throw me onto the ground, end my life then and there, but he never did. To my utter surprise, he never even came close to touching me or causing me harm during his rampage. I pushed myself into the corner of the counter, bringing my legs up to my chest and hugging them tightly. I began to sob silently into my knees. Why did I have to be this way? Why did I have to always be messing something up? After a few more minutes, the Alpha King finally stopped or ran out of things to break. The room became silent except for my loud sobs that I could no longer hold back. Without warning, I felt his hand grasp onto my leg gently. I hadn't even realized he was in front of me again. I jerked back and sobbed louder. Oh, no, I am so sorry, my love, the king's deep voice said. Please, please do not cry. Neither my wolf nor I can handle seeing one more tear spill from your beautiful eyes. I didn't mean to frighten you. I can't, he sighed. Will you please look at me? I am not sure what I or my wolf will do if you refuse to look at me any longer. Please. The king was begging me. Me. A lowly human slave. He said please. He called me love. And beautiful. No one had ever called me anything like that. Not being able to resist looking at his eyes again, especially when he asked so nicely, I raised my head. I was met yet again with those beautiful turquoise eyes. And just like last time, my world seemed to stop and nothing else seemed to matter except staring into his eyes for the rest of eternity. But, unlike last time, I didn't stop myself there. I let my eyes roam over the rest of his face as well, taking in his straight nose and plump lips, his strong, sharp jaw, and beautiful golden, curly hair. He was absolutely breathtaking, truly perfect in every way. He fit the title of the king. His eyes studied me too, traveling over every aspect of my face, inspecting my facial features that I was sure could come nowhere near the same level of beauty as his. I almost dropped my gaze when I realized how thoroughly he was studying me. My insecurities were coming forward at full force, reminding me of how ugly and unworthy I am. Ugly, stupid, human slave. I didn't know how long we stayed like that, just staring at each other, when the Alpha King suddenly brought his hand up and cupped my cheek. My breathing hitched, but I was somehow able to stop myself from flinching away. He ran his thumb over my cheekbone in a caring way that I had not been expecting. I winced slightly when he made contact with the bruise there. I had completely forgotten about it. He frowned deeply. A small growl left his lips. Who hit you? He asked in a gentle but low tone. I didn't want to tell him. One of the guards had hit me yesterday when he found out that I had taken food from one of the other slaves. The slave had offered it to me after seeing that I was not to be given food for dinner as I was on a diet that never seemed to end. I was so hungry and couldn't stop staring at her food as she sat across from me at the small table in the slave's dining hall. It was only a small piece of bread that she offered me, and I had assumed that I would be able to eat it fast enough so that nobody would notice. But I was wrong. I had gone to bed that night with a black eye and bruises all over my stomach to prove it. I couldn't tell the Alpha King this. For some reason, I didn't want him knowing I was going against the rules, trying to eat when I so obviously needed to lose weight. I didn't want him to think less of me. I did something bad and broke the rules. I deserved it, I said softly. He growled softly. His chest was rising and falling again with the presence of his wolf. It was as if every time I spoke, his wolf would appear, angered by my words. Why could I never say the right thing? I wished I could go back to not speaking at all. It was so much easier. The king suddenly leaned forward slowly and gently placed his forehead on mine, staring into my wide, frightened eyes with a pensive expression. His arms wrapped around my waist. He sure was touchy. Not that I minded. I like being touched by another person after being by myself for so long. I especially liked the feel of his sparky skin against mine and the warmth it brought me. I seriously doubt that you did anything to deserve that. Nobody deserves that, he growled out. I broke the rules, I repeated, somehow finding it a tad bit easier to talk to him. I did something bad and had to face the consequences. That's how it works. I definitely deserved it, I said without any hesitation in my voice. The Alpha King's frown deepened, causing my brows to come together in confusion. Shouldn't he be happy that he had a slave under his authority that knew her place and was willing to take punishment without resistance? I am going to dedicate every day of my life to showing you exactly what you deserve, he said. Now it was my turn to frown. I already knew what I deserved. I deserved to be punished and die. He didn't need to prove it to me. And it wouldn't take his whole life. It would only take him 1 second and I would be dead on this very floor, my soul off in a better place. Perhaps he meant he was going to torture me for the rest of his life until I knew my place. Terror filled my chest. That would be worse than death. He leaned back. You will tell me how you got the bruise later, he said. I nodded quickly, scared out of my mind. The king sighed again. Then his nose lifted to the air and sniffed. He was smelling for something. One of his hands lifted off my waist and then, very slowly, moved down my legs until they were at the bottom of my skirts. My breathing hitched, wondering what he was doing but not daring to stop him. He looked up at me, his expression softening when he met my eyes. I just want to check something, his deep voice said. Don't worry, darling. He slowly lifted up my skirts, dragging his hands up my bare legs until my knees were showing. He stopped there, staring down at my beat-up knees that I had injured earlier in the kitchen. He growled. I thought I smelled your blood. You're hurt, he stated. I wasn't sure how to respond. I kept my mouth shut. He stepped away and grabbed a metal container on the counter next to me. That must have been what he had left the room earlier to get. He opened it and took out a bottle and a cloth, then came back over to me and poured some of the clear liquid from the bottle onto the cloth. It looked like water but definitely did not smell like it. I had never smelled anything like it before. He looked at me and, for a second, I forgot to drop my gaze. Immediately, I lowered my eyes to my lap, mentally chastising myself for looking at him without his permission. No, he said. He gently cupped my cheek again and lifted my head so that I was looking at him once again. Why was he always so gentle with me? I didn't deserve it. Always meet my eyes. Please. It calms my wolf and myself to see you looking at me, to see your gorgeous eyes. Don't ever lower your gaze when it comes to me. Okay? I sucked in a breath. His words made absolutely no sense. Calmed his wolf? My gorgeous eyes? Everything he said just made me more confused. However, I reminded myself that I hadn't been punished for meeting his gaze yet. Therefore, I couldn't see a reason not to look at him. I nodded my head slowly in response, meeting his gaze. A wide smile took over his face that made my heart flutter. I found myself liking his smile. I hoped I would get to see him smile more before I died. Seemingly pleased with my response, he looked back down at the cloth in his hand and then at my beat-up knees that were all bloody from scraping them on the kitchen floor. Please stop dropping to your knees when you see me. Just seeing your face bruised and scraped knees is enough to make myself and my wolf go ballistic. Choosing not to question what he says anymore, Positive that I am just bound to never truly understand why he says what he says, I nod my head yet again. I would just have to agree to anything he asked me to do. It was the only way to make it through this situation without going insane from all of the confusion running through my mind. You? Follow orders? Yeah, right. He brought the cloth down to my left knee but stopped right before it touched my skin. He looked at me with soft eyes. This is going to hurt, but bear with me. He squeezed my hand gently. It's going to be okay. My breath caught in my throat. So this is how it was going to start. He was going to torture me by applying pain to my already open wounds. It made sense. It was surely the best way to cause the most pain. He was smart. I squared my shoulders slightly, ready for the pain. I could do this. I was strong. I was ready to face my last moments bravely. When he didn't say or do anything for a few seconds, I slowly raised my gaze to his face. He was studying me. And he was smiling slightly, pleased. Had I done something to please him? Or was he happy to finally start my punishment? I didn't have time to wonder what he was thinking about for much longer. The king looked back down at my knees and then gently placed the cloth on the wound with much more care than I thought he would. I tensed slightly at the sting that resulted from the liquid, shutting my eyes tightly as he wiped the rag over my blood. To my surprise, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad at all. I had endured much worse than this. I waited for the pain to worsen but was shocked when he just lifted the rag and then moved it to the other knee and did the same there. And, yet again, it barely hurt at all. The pain from whatever he put into my wounds was gone by the time he took the cloth away. I watched him closely, trying to decipher exactly what he was trying to achieve. Perhaps he had used the wrong liquid. Should I tell him? No, that would be stupid. I couldn't correct the king. Perhaps this was some sort of slow-acting poison that would take a while to kill me, starting out as nothing and then building until I died of pain. Yes, that must be what he is doing. The pain would surely be starting again soon and then increase with vengeance. After he closed the bottle of poison and put it aside, he reached into the tin box again and pulled out another small bottle. From this bottle, he squeezed some sort of white, gooey substance. He again put this on the wounds on my knees and, just like with the liquid, it hurt a little bit at first contact but was gone just as soon as it appeared. What sort of poison was he using? Next, he placed a cloth over the wound on each of my knees and then wrapped another, longer piece of cloth over that one and around the back of my knees to hold it in place. So this would make sure the poison stayed there until it had done its job of killing me. When he was finally done, he stood and nodded as he examined his work. He looked back at me. I had to remind myself that it was okay to meet his gaze. Don't take these off until I tell you to, okay, he said. I nodded my head quickly. Duh. He narrowed his eyes a bit. I like when you speak, remember? Use your words. I was already failing with that simple instruction. Of course, Your Majesty. He smiled a bit in approval and examined me some more. His gaze stopped at my still exposed legs. I felt myself blush when I realized that you could nearly see my undergarments due to my lifted skirts and parted legs. What the king must think of me right now. No man had ever seen this much of my bare skin. I moved to shut my legs quickly but was stopped when the king suddenly nudged himself between them, placing his large hands on either side of my hips. I gasped at the intimate position. Maybe that was what the king wanted. Madame Melinda was always telling us slaves that she was preparing us to be companions to a wolf. Although I wasn't positive as to what that meant, I knew that it had something to do with sex. Someday, I assumed she was going to give me away to a werewolf from another pack, just like she had done with so many other slaves who had been at the pack house for too long. My job would be to do chores, make meals, and please the man in bed. My alpha had told the king to do with me as he wishes. Could that mean that the king wanted to sleep with me? Could that be why he was being so nice to me? And another thing, the king said, snapping me out of my terrifying thoughts, please stop calling me Your Majesty. I truly hate it. Call me Adrian. My brows furrowed. Was that his name? Like, his real name? I couldn't call him that. No one but his family was allowed to call him that. Was this another test? But it was the sincerity in his voice and the softness in his eyes that made me think that maybe he really did want me to call him that. Maybe this wasn't a test. Maybe he liked the women in his bed to call him that. Yes, that had to be it. He would surely order me to stop after I had finished pleasing him. Adrian? I asked quietly. He breathed in deeply and shut his eyes as if he was savoring the sound of his own name. I could see why, it was a nice name. Yes, little one. Adrian. Knowing I shouldn't question him, I just nodded my head. Oh, okay. And soon I will have a name in which to call you, he said. But for now, we will go to bed. The king lifted me into his arms and brought me to the large bedroom. The room was just as beautiful just as the bathroom had been. It had high, painted ceilings with a large chandelier in the center and gold decals everywhere. An enormous California king-size bed was the focal point. I swallowed a hard lump in my throat. I guess this would be the moment that I would lose my virginity. My nerves were spilling out of me like water in a boiling pot. I didn't feel ready. I knew the basics of sex based on what I had overheard werewolves talking about around the pack house, but, otherwise, had no idea what I was doing or how to really please a man in bed. And for some reason, I really didn't want to disappoint the king. I wanted to make him feel good. I should consider myself lucky to have the king of werewolves use me, to lose my virginity to a man so powerful. Not many slave girls would get the same opportunity. But I knew it would hurt. A lot. The king wasn't a small man. There was no doubt in my mind that his, package would be just as big as the rest of him. He was going to tear me apart without any remorse or regret. And then he would kill me. The king set me down on the edge of the bed and straightened, looking down at me with his intense blue eyes. I will be right back. Don't move, okay? I nodded my head in understanding. He walked away from me and disappeared into the walk-in closet attached to the room. I squirmed anxiously while I waited for him. Should I undress? Or did he want to take my clothes off himself? I had heard a werewolf say that men like to do that, right? Or had I misunderstood that? So I shouldn't take my clothes off? He had told me not to move. God, why was this so difficult? I didn't have time to make a decision before he came back into the room. He was holding some clothes. I found it hard to peel my eyes away from his bare chest, only now getting the opportunity to examine his upper half. He was extremely built and had huge muscles on every single part of his body. I swallowed roughly. He could easily snap me like a toothpick. And probably will. When he was standing in front of me, he held a piece of clothing. You will have to wear this for tonight. I looked down at the fabric in his hands and then slowly took it from him. He had given me a white, button-up shirt. I frowned slightly. He wanted me to wear this while we had sex. Weren't people usually naked? But, yet again, I didn't question him. Instead, I slowly stood and stepped away from the bed. I could feel my hands shaking as I reached for the laces on the back of my maid's dress, starting to undo them. I heard the king suck in a breath. Do you want me to leave while you undress? Or turn around? I looked at him. His blue eyes sent my heart into a spasm. Did he want to leave? Did he not want to see my body? I wouldn't blame him if that were the case. You may do whatever pleases you, your majesty, I said shakily. Adrian, he corrected me sternly. I nodded quickly. I had forgotten. Crap. You may do whatever pleases you, Adrian, I corrected myself. He growled once in approval. When he didn't move or say anything else, my hands continued to unlace the back of my dress until the bodice opened and fell to the floor. Then, before I lost any of my courage, I pushed my skirts down, leaving me standing in only my undergarment. It looked sort of like a nightgown but was much more scandalous and didn't leave much to the imagination. It was basically see-through. I was sure the king could see every part of my body and imperfection on my skin. I couldn't bring myself to look at him. I didn't want to see his reaction to seeing my body. I didn't want to see his expression turn into one of disgust. I reached my shaky hands for the shoulders of my undergarment, ready to push it down and officially reveal my naked body to the king, but couldn't stop myself from pausing. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat as I stared down at my feet. I spoke. I knew that I shouldn't be speaking without permission. But there was something about the king that made me think he wouldn't punish me for something so minor. Would it be alright if I were to turn around? I asked quietly. I waited anxiously for his reply. It was the first time I had spoken to him without being spoken to first. I could only hope that it didn't anger him. When he didn't say anything for a while, my stomach dropped in fear. He had said before that I could speak but never said I could speak without being spoken to first. And he definitely didn't say that I could request things from him. How stupid could I be? I apologize, I said quickly. It was not my place to ask that. I am so sorry. He stood and approached me. I couldn't stop myself from taking a step back in fear. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. I suppressed a sob. I truly am sorry, Your Majesty, I said, desperation and panic leaking from my tone. Please, I'll undress now. Please. He seemed confused and perhaps a little shocked. No, he said quickly, still approaching me. No, I'm sorry. Please do not be afraid. I was distracted by all the skin you were showing. I barely processed what you said, lost in my thoughts. You have done nothing wrong. I took in a shaky breath to try and calm myself. He was looking at my body? Did he like what he saw? My shoulders sagged. No, of course not. I had been told thousands of times how ugly I was, inadequate in every way. Small boobs, flat butt, boring blonde hair, and freckled skin littered with scars and bruises that I had earned through misbehaving. The only part of me that I liked even in the slightest was my bright green eyes. Madame Melinda told me once that they were unique and made me look innocent. She said that man would like looking down into my wide eyes while they fucked me, whatever that meant. It was the closest thing to a compliment I had ever received. Well, it was the closest thing I had received to a compliment until the man in front of me had called me beautiful just moments before. Although, I was realizing now that was said only to get me into his bed. As if he needed to lure me in with false terms of endearment. I would do whatever he wanted without any resistance. Of course it is okay if you turn around, the king continued, surprising me. You may do whatever makes you most comfortable. Always. His words were nice. Too nice. They made me nervous. I hesitated for a moment, considering continuing to undress in the position I was in to avoid any sort of anger from the king. But as I felt his eyes begin to roam over my body again and the shame crawling up my throat, I couldn't stop myself from quickly turning around so that my back was to him. It made me feel better to know that I wouldn't have to deal with the disappointment of watching his face drop and turn into a sneer when he saw how ugly I truly was beneath my clothes. Why did it hurt so much to know that he didn't like the way I looked? When I imagined myself pleasuring a man for the first time, the fear of his displeasure over my appearance never occurred to me. Not once. My job wasn't to be self-conscious, it was to please the man in whatever way he wanted. So why did it send shooting pain straight to my heart to think that the king thought I was ugly? It doesn't matter what he thinks of you. You'll be dead by morning, the voice inside my head reminded me. A dead, used slave that couldn't do anything right. I swallowed down the lump that was developing in my throat. The king was still standing behind me, waiting for me to take off my clothes. I needed to concentrate and stop worrying about my silly insecurities. The king wouldn't wait forever. I was surprised he had even waited until now. I pushed my undergarment off my shoulders. It fell around my waist, being held there by a string tied around my waist. Madame Melinda had placed that string there in order to ensure that I didn't gain too much weight. If the string got too tight, she would know that I had been sneaking food when I wasn't supposed to. I wasn't allowed to touch it or take it off. The string was loose now, falling at the top of my hips. My upper half was completely exposed, although all the king could see was my back as I was not facing him. I could feel his gaze though, like small flames running all along my body. I could feel his eyes roam over my back, running over the newly revealed skin. I wondered if he could hear my heart frantically beating a mile a minute. I reached down to push the clothing under the string around my waist so it would fall off but stopped when I felt the gentle touch of the king's hand on my back. I gasped and nearly jumped out of my skin. The king ran his hand over my back, leaving the same sparks as before dancing over my skin. He was tracing the scars that were left behind from when I was whipped multiple times as a child. I shut my eyes tightly. I couldn't imagine what he thought of me, the disobedient girl who needed to be punished. His hands didn't stop there, moving to trace my ribcage, drifting softly over the huge bruises there. I waited for his touch to turn more forceful but it never did. A strange realization hit me. For the first time in my life, someone was touching me without causing me pain. And I liked it. I liked the way he was touching me a lot. I was snapped out of my thoughts when the king abruptly growled so loudly that my ears rang. I jumped in fright, letting out a choked sob. I quickly brought my hand up to my mouth to ensure that no more noises left my mouth. I knew he was upset with the appearance of my body just like I knew he would be. "What did they do to you?" His voice growled in my ear, low and dangerous. I stopped myself. What did he mean? "I am so sorry, Your Majesty." He growled again. Shit. I had forgotten to call him by his first name yet again. I nearly smacked myself over the head for my mistake. I mean Adrian. I do not mean to upset you. He didn't respond. He simply placed both of his hands on my waist, avoiding the bruises littering my sides, and turned me around so quickly that my head spun. I had expected him to add to the bruises. Or maybe to be chastised over my past disobedience. What I wasn't expecting was to be pulled into his chest. Without saying a word, he wrapped his arms around me and stuffed his face into my neck, inhaling deeply. I was beyond bewildered. This was such a strange position we were in. I had never been held like this. I had never been held at all. Period. Is this what it felt like to lay in the arms of another? Is this what it felt like to receive affection? If it was, I never wanted it to end. Even if it was false care and devotion, only given in the foreplay of sex, I still reveled in it. It felt so good. I finally understood why I always saw werewolf mates constantly holding each other and leaving teasing touches on each other's skin as if they couldn't get enough of each other. This man was not my mate, but it still felt better than anything I had ever experienced. Without my permission, as if my body was moving on its own accord, I felt my arms wrap around the king's large body, wanting to be closer to him, to have more of my skin touching his, and to calm his shaking body. The king had been growling harshly in my ear until then, his entire body spasming in fury. However, the moment that my hands touched his warm, bare, muscular back, all of that stopped. He stood perfectly still. At the feeling of his stillness, I froze as well, sensing his change in demeanor. The only movement from either of us came from the rise and fall of our chests, our ragged breathing seeming to sink into one motion. After a minute like that, I felt the soft rumbling in his chest and a low growl brush against the hollow of my neck. I stiffened slightly. This growl sounded nothing like the others I had heard from him. This growl sounded more like a purr, quiet and calm. With his face still in my hair, I felt him nip lightly on my neck, more purrs leaving his chest. The sparks that occurred only when I touched the king increased tenfold the moment his canines scraped against the spot on my neck. My knees nearly collapsed beneath me in shock. The sparks traveled all throughout my body, causing delicious warmth and satisfaction to course through me like a wave. The wave moved slowly, taking its time to touch every single part of my being until I was completely submerged in its warm water, more content than I had ever been. Eventually, the sparks stopped their dancing on my skin and landed with ferocity in my core, leaving behind an intense, tingly feeling that I had never felt before. The king's lips drifted over the spot on my neck once more before his nose traveled up my throat and across my chin, stopping by my ear. I heard him chuckle softly, his hot breath blowing at the loose hairs that had fallen from my bun. "I can smell your desire," he whispered huskily. His grip tightened on my waist, and, God, you have no idea what it's doing to me. It was his words that snapped me out of my trance with so much force that I nearly jumped out of his arms at that very moment. I felt blood rush up my chest and to my cheeks, staining them what I was sure was a deep red. I was suddenly very aware of the intimate position I was in with the hybrid king. Neither of us had clothing covering our upper halves, leaving my bare breasts pressed against his. I was basically naked and touching the king in a way I had never touched any other man. I then realized that I had touched him without his permission. It was as if I had no control over myself. What the hell was the matter with me? Had I forgotten everything that Madame Melinda had taught me about my place as a slave? And the better question. Why did it feel so right to be touching him in that way? He had been growling in my ear, threatening to kill me by biting on my jugular, even commenting on how bad I smelled. I had just stood there, tightening my arms around him as if I hadn't hurt him, just asking for him to punish me. So why hadn't he? Convincing myself that my behavior was only a cause of the lack of the physical contact I had received throughout my life, I forced my arms to disconnect from his body and drop to my sides. I frowned at how hard it was, like taking two magnets apart. At my movement, the king leaned back so that our eyes were meeting. It felt strange to look another person in the eyes after staring down for so long, but so good at the same time. I felt lucky to know that the last eyes I would see before death were his magnificent blue ones. He would surely be killing me soon. And then the image of his blue ocean staring down at me would stay with me into death and for the rest of eternity in the afterlife. I suddenly shook my head slightly to clear my thoughts. I was letting myself get distracted again. Why was that happening so much tonight? I gave all of my focus back to the king as I waited for what he was going to say next. He didn't talk for a while, studying me, trying to read me as if I were a book. I felt my body shrink under his intense gaze. I desperately wanted this night to be over. However it was going to end, with me bloodied and bruised, or just simply dead, I wanted it to happen so I could stop feeling so conflicted and confused. The king's hand suddenly reached up to cheek, wiping away a tear with his thumb. I hadn't even realized that I had been crying. He then reached down and covered my exposed upper half with my undergarment that was still hanging from my waist. I blushed deeply, having completely forgotten that I was basically naked. Why didn't you tell me about the bruises on your sides? The king asked, moving his hands to cup my own once again. You have multiple broken ribs. You must be in so much pain. My brows knit together in confusion. Wasn't that the point of the bruises and broken bones? And of being punished? I was supposed to be feeling the pain. I deserved to feel pain. I thought about the way he had applied poison to the open cuts on my knees. It occurred to me that his obvious preferred method of punishment was to cause pain to already inflicted injuries. He had probably wanted to do something similar to my ribs. It must be expected in the royal kingdom for slaves to state their injuries to their punisher. I'm sorry, I whispered. I racked my brain over anything else that might be wrong with me so I could tell him. I also have a bruise on my head. The king's eyes narrowed in anger and he immediately lifted me and marched us over to the bed. I gasped in fright from the sudden movement. He placed me on the edge of the bed once again, standing over me with a scowl on his face. Show me, he snapped. I could feel the presence of his wolf and the energy he was giving off and it scared the absolute crap out of me. I had upset him so much tonight that the fact that he hadn't shifted yet and let his wolf tear my head off was beyond me. He was close to letting that happen. I couldn't risk upsetting him anymore. Assuming he was talking about the bruise I had just mentioned, I reached up and let my hair fall from my bun, placing the hairpin to the side. Then I gently parted my hair where the bruise was so that he could see it. I held back a whimper when even that small movement caused immense pain to shoot behind my eyes and small, black dots in my vision. The king leaned down to inspect the bruise himself. I tried to hold still. Jesus Christ. This isn't just a bruise, he spat, venom seeping from his tone. You have a bump so large on your head that it could be seen from space. I can't believe I hadn't noticed it before. It's scabbed over and black and purple. He placed his hand under my chin and tilted my head up to look at him. He searched my eyes with a concerned expression that confused me. There is no doubt in my mind that you have a severe concussion. Especially since you're human. I winced slightly when he said human. Stupid, misbehaving human. Concussion? I asked quietly. I had no idea what that meant. Was it bad? The king growled and looked back at the bump on my head, baring his teeth in anger. Has your head been hurting? Have you been nauseous? Sensitive to the light? Had terrible balance and ringing in your ears? My heart rate escalated in realization. I had been experiencing all of those things and more. It was silly to think about it now, but I thought that all of those symptoms were my body punishing my mind, making it harder for me to do everyday tasks. I thought that even my body was turning against me, deciding that even it didn't want to be associated with someone like me. I had no idea that all of this was due to an injury to my head. How did this happen? The king demanded. I knew I had to tell him. He was too angry to disobey him right now. I had to tell him even if I knew he would think less of me afterward. I choked on a sob creeping up my throat, fighting to get my words out. I broke a plate, I said in shame. The king's eyes narrowed. You broke a plate, he repeated incredulously. I nodded and hung my head in shame. Yes. I tripped while doing dishes and dropped it. I was suddenly very worried that he was going to punish me for this even though I had already been punished. It wasn't as if I didn't deserve it, breaking something that belonged to the pack that took care of me. When I looked at the king again, he looked angry. Extremely angry. Yes, I was definitely going to be punished. Looking into his eyes that brought me so much comfort yet also so much fear, I said, I am so sorry. Stop, the king's livid voice interrupted. I don't want to hear you apologize, he snapped. I sucked in a breath, immediately dropping my gaze at his harsh tone. I had an intense urge to go to my knees and submit to him but was too scared to move. Stupid. 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 The voice said in my head. You should just shut up and never speak again. Yes, right, you shouldn't apologize. You don't deserve forgiveness for the mistakes you have made. You deserve punishment and death. My body began to shake once again when the king suddenly grabbed my head with both hands and tilted my head even further down than it already was. At first, I thought that he was forcing me into a position of submission, but then I felt his gaze move over the bruise on my head once again. He was surely re-examining my punishment to see if it was harsh enough. Fresh tears of terror rolled from my eyes. Tell me exactly how this wound came to be, his deep voice said gratingly. Tell me exactly how this wound came to be, his deep voice said gratingly. I opened my mouth to speak but was embarrassed when nothing but a small squeak came out. I was too afraid to talk. What would he think of me after I told him what happened? I was so desperate to be in his good graces and didn't he want that to change? I tried to hold back the tears, force them back down, but was unable to stop the loud hiccup that came from my mouth. And just like that, the floodgate opened and I was sobbing uncontrollably in front of the king. I'm so sorry. I said through my tears. I didn't care if he had just asked me to stop apologizing, I couldn't help it. I am so sorry. I was so stupid. I wasn't looking where I was going and I tripped over my own feet like an idiot and fell and dropped the pea plate. I was crying so hard at this point that I wouldn't be surprised if the king didn't understand a word I said. Beta Michael punished me and gave me what I deserved by hitting me with the butt of a knife. That's how I got the bruise. I dropped my face into my hands and cried freely, my body moving up and down in out of control spasms. I cried for a while. I couldn't even bring myself to care when the king abruptly wrapped his arms around me and began speaking to me, too caught up in my emotions of dread and fear. I didn't want to listen to whatever lecture he was giving me, so I just continued to sob, drowning out whatever he was saying. I knew what I did was unforgivable. I didn't want to hear it from him. It occurred to me that the way the king was touching me wasn't harsh enough for what I deserved. The way he had his arms around me and was rocking me back and forth didn't hurt at all. I deserved pain. With that in mind, still sobbing uncontrollably, I brought my hand up and smashed it down onto the bruise on my head with all the force I possessed. I cried harder when the pain flew throughout my body and caused my world to spin and black dots to dance in my vision. The king screamed something in my ear, but I ignored him and smashed my hand down over and over again, intent on giving myself the pain I deserved. What are you doing? Stop, the king yelled. He grabbed my wrists and pushed them to my sides even though I fought against him. I was too weak at this point. I was too tired. Stop, he said again, quieter this time. I hung my head and cried silently for a moment, shame coursing through me. The king did nothing but continue to hold my wrists and breathe out heavily. After a few minutes, my crying stopped and my body went numb. The king, still standing in front of me, gently grabbed my chin and tilted my head up until I was looking at him. His eyes were so gentle now. Sad. Broken. What had made him look like that? He shut his eyes and leaned down until our foreheads were touching gently. He placed his hands on either side of my face and rubbed his thumbs on my cheeks. Why did his touch feel so good? Please, he whispered gently, please, never, ever, do that again. He squeezed my cheeks and looked at me. Were there tears in his eyes? You have to promise me that you won't ever hurt yourself again. Under any circumstance. I can't. He paused and swallowed harshly, looking pained. You just can't hurt yourself. Please. You have to promise me that. A sudden and unexpected need to make him feel better consumed me. I didn't want him to be sad. I nodded my head. I'm sorry, I whispered, hoping it would help take the pain out of his expression. I want to do it again. The king knelt down in front of me, going to his knees so that he was eye level with me. My immediate instinct was to also go to my knees, as a human slave should not be at the same level as the alpha king. We must always be lower. Without even thinking, I made the move to get off the bed, but the king's hand firmly placed on my hip stopped me. It was like he knew what I was doing. "There is no need for that, love," he said softly. "Stay where you are." He frowned, his gaze going from the top of my head, to my black eye, to my purple and black ribs that he could still see through my undergarment. His eyes were changing color, his irises flickering from light blue, to dark blue, to the most terrifying one of all, bright red. His wolf and vampire were upset. He growled softly and, to my utter surprise, dropped his face into my lap. I jumped in shock. "They said it would be difficult, but I never imagined this," he whispered roughly into the bare skin of my thighs. I almost didn't hear him. I looked down at the golden blonde head of hair in my lap in complete bewilderment. What the heck was happening right now? I felt like screaming out in frustration and confusion. The king of all creatures was taking comfort in my lap. After a minute or two of the king breathing deeply into the bare skin of my legs, he finally lifted his head and straightened so that we were once again at eye level. His hands found my thighs again, gently parting them and moving his large form in between, never taking his eyes from me. My breathing escalated at his touch. I could feel my cheeks turning a dark red as he leaned forward and placed his forehead against mine once again. I could feel his breath on my lips. He smelled like toothpaste. "No more hurting yourself. Ever. And next time, you will tell me when you are in pain. Am I clear?" he said sternly. I nodded in response, distracted by the way that his large hands were moving up and down my thighs. The position we were in was extremely intense and intimate. "Words," the king said, causing my eyes to snap back to his. "I want your words. I am very serious about this." About not hurting myself? About telling him about my injuries? About speaking when he asks questions? "Yes," I breathed out, hoping he would take it as agreement to all three terms. "I'm sorry." Fresh injuries meant less healing and more pain for his punishments. At least that I understood. And it would be too merciful to punish myself. He wanted to do it himself. The king stood and took a step back, running his hand through his golden curls in frustration. I couldn't stop myself from admiring the way in which his muscles flexed, my eyes captivated by the way he moved. He was so strong. I wish I were that strong. Maybe then I would be more useful to my pack. His eyes scanned me up and down, and then he stepped towards me and slowly grabbed the string around my waist. He began to work at the knot, trying to undo it. My hands twitched at my sides, nearly grabbing his hands to stop him before falling back down. I had been wearing that string around my waist since I was 12 years old. I wasn't allowed to take it off. Didn't he know that? The king's eyes snapped up to look at my face the moment he saw my hand's slight movement. "What?" he asked. I kept quiet. The king took my hands into his own and squeezed them gently. "Something is on your mind. Please, talk to me. I want to know." I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Sudden exhaustion washed over me. I didn't want to do this anymore. The king sighed when I didn't answer. I was surprised when he didn't touch the string around my waist again. He didn't even touch my undergarment. He simply picked up the white shirt off the floor and handed it to me. "Put this on. I don't know what I will do if I have to look at those bruises for a moment longer. We will ice them tomorrow." I swallowed harshly as I quickly took off my undergarment all the way and put the shirt on. I knew it. I knew he would be disgusted by my body. How could he not be? And what had he meant by icing them? Could it be that he was going to cover me in ice until I died from the cold? That would be a horrible way to go. I had once been locked out of the pack house and forced to sleep in the snow. It had been the worst night of my life. Well, until now. My hands were swollen and covered in frostbite, and I was sick for months. Once the shirt was covering me, the bottom going all the way down to my knees, the king grabbed my hand. He pulled me to the bed. "It is time to sleep," he said. My head snapped up to look at him. "Sleep?" He stopped and looked back at me, surprised that I had spoken. His face turned to one of anger. "Uh-oh. Yes, sleep," he growled. "They let you sleep around here, don't they? You don't want to have sex?" I asked. The moment the words left my mouth, my eyes widened to the size of saucers. My hand slapped over my mouth. I did not just say that. God, did I have no filter? He probably thought I was a whore, begging for him to get into my panties. The king's eyes darkened as the presence of his wolf became clear. Sex? He asked in a low, husky voice. My body reacted to it in a strange way, sending shivers down my spine. You thought we were having sex tonight? The intense stupidity that I felt at his words was overwhelming. Of course he didn't want to sex with me. How could I have ever thought that? I removed my hand from my mouth. Forgive me, I didn't mean to offend you. I had assumed that was what you meant when you said you were bringing me to bed. I realize my mistake now. Although I couldn't see him, I could tell that he was fuming. He had every right to be angry. Who was I to assume that the Alpha King would want to be with me in such an intimate way? If he wanted me in that way, then it would mean that I was worthy somehow. I was not worthy and was a fool to think otherwise. He growled. Exactly how many men have brought you into their bed before? He asked in a voice that was calm but deadly at the same time. I gasped. Did he think I had been with other men? Did he think of me as a whore who took pleasure in having sex with as many men as possible? None, Your Majesty. I have saved my virginity just as Madame Melinda has instructed all the slaves to do. I promise. His hand grabbed my chin and lifted my eyes to meet his furious ones. Instructed to save your virginity, he breathed out sharply. Why on earth were you instructed to save your virginity? Didn't he know how being a slave worked? Young, female slaves were always given away to men. It was how I always knew my life would turn out. To be gifted to a man when I came of age, Your Majesty. In order to please that wolf with my purity. An earth-shaking growl left the king. I squealed in shock and covered my ears at the loud noise. Then, faster than I ever thought possible, the king flew across the room and into the bathroom, slamming the door closed behind him. A second later, loud bangs of destruction and roars of fury were heard. Was he tearing apart the bathroom again? Could it take any more? I stood where he had left me, shaking in fear as I listened to the loud sound of him demolishing the bathroom. Was it my response to his question that caused him to react this way? Was there a better way in which to respond? A minute passed. And then 2 and 3. During that time, I found myself dropping to my knees and bowing my head in hopes of lessening the king's anger. Finally, the door of the bathroom flew open and the pounding steps of the king entered the room. Every breath that came from his mouth sounded more like a growl as his wolf continued to fight for control. I tried to calm my chaotic nerves as his feet quickly approached me. He stopped in front of me and, without saying a word, lifted me into his arms the way he had so many times already that night. He didn't look at me as he marched us over to the bed and unceremoniously dropped me in the middle. He leaned over me, placing his hands on either side of me. I had no choice but to lay back as he looked down at me with a fierce expression. We will not be having sex tonight, he snapped. We will sleep and that is it. You need sleep. Understood? I nodded quickly, scared but also secretly relieved by his words. Yes, Your Majesty. He growled for the 100th time that night at my response. Stop calling me that. Realizing my mistake, I quickly corrected myself. I'm sorry. Yes, Adrian. I watched, completely helpless, as the king went around the suite and began to put out all of the candles lighting the room. Shouldn't he have a servant do this for him? Shoot, I was the servant. I sat up. Do you want me to? One look from the king's piercing gaze had me shutting right up. His expression told me all I needed to know. He didn't want me saying another word tonight. Do you think you can do that, slave? The voice in my head said. With every candle that the king blew out, the room became darker. My nerves rose. It occurred to me that once all the lights were out, the king would still be able to see me due to his wolf genes, but I would have no way of seeing him. What would he do to me in the dark? With that question stirring up intense fear in the bottom of my stomach, the last candle was blown out and we were bathed in black. I stayed perfectly still, listening for any sort of movement in the pitch-black room. The bed dipped slightly and I sucked in a quick breath. I could feel the king laying down next to me, his body heat rolling onto me. I waited for a moment, then 2, but nothing happened. Well, I guess that was it. How strange. He didn't punish me. He didn't have sex with me. All he had done was put slow-acting poison on my wounds and put me in his clothing. None of it made sense. I moved silently off the bed, ready to go back to my own quarters so that the king could sleep. I was grateful that he had decided to leave my punishment until tomorrow. I would accept any extra time that he wanted to give me. I was eager to get back to my room, to sleep in a familiar place where I could process everything that had happened tonight. But as soon as my feet touched the floor, the king spoke. "What are you doing?" he asked. I hesitated. I was going to go to sleep. Like you said. He had said that, right? Okay, he replied slowly. Then where are you going? To my quarters, Your Majesty. I heard him chuckle deeply into the darkness. That's not what I meant, baby. Baby? Baby? Why would he be calling me baby if he wasn't attracted to me and didn't want to have sex with me? You will be sleeping in this room, he said. My whole body stilled. He wanted me to sleep in here? In this room? I had never been anywhere as nice as this room. It was warm in here and the floors weren't wet. It would be a dream to sleep here. In here, Your Maj Adrian? I asked in a timid voice. Yes, the king responded. In here. I tried to look at him through the darkness so that I could tell if he was joking but couldn't see him. What about him? Where would he go if I was here? There was nowhere in the entire pack house that was nicer than this room. Oh, I replied softly. I almost asked him where he would be sleeping but shut my mouth quickly. That was none of my business. He could do whatever he wanted. It was not my place to question him. Choosing to just nod in response instead of asking more questions, I moved quietly off the bed, getting ready to move to the floor so I could sleep. I wanted to give the king space, so I moved all the way to the other side of the room, finding a corner that didn't have any furniture in front of it. I sat down on the hardwood floor, running my hands gently across the smooth wood. I never thought I would describe wood as soft, but that's exactly what the surface beneath my fingertips felt like. I laid down on my side, bringing my knees up to my chest and curling into a ball on the ground the way I always slept. I sighed in content. I had never felt more comfortable in my life. I couldn't believe I got to spend the night here. Never did I ever think I would be allowed such luxuries. What are you doing? I jerked in fright. I couldn't see the king, but I could tell that he was above me, looking down at me on the floor. Wow, he moved quietly. How long had he been there? I'm sorry, was my immediate response. Had you not said didn't you want me to sleep in here? I asked hesitantly. I was seriously getting sick of being so dumb that I needed clarification on everything the king said to me. Yes, I did say that, he replied. So why are you on the floor? I shifted uncomfortably. Was I missing something? After a moment of silence, the king sucked in a deep breath of realization. Did you think you were going to sleep on the floor? He asked. I suddenly felt really stupid. I didn't know why though. Well. Yes? I admitted into the darkness. Do you usually sleep on the floor? He asked, venom pouring from his tone. Why did he sound angry about it? Why yes. I'm sorry, I whispered, even though I wasn't sure what I was apologizing for. His hands unexpectedly wrapped under my legs and back, lifting me into his arms. I gasped, placing one hand on his chest to steady myself. Come here, he said gently, as he cradled me to his large form. He walked us to the other side of the room and set me down in the middle of the bed once again. Without warning, a light so bright that I had to cover my eyes illuminated the room. I gasped in shock. The king was holding a giant ball of fire in the palm of his hand. My eyes widened. He was using his royal powers, producing fire out of nothing. I couldn't stop myself from scrambling backward as fear consumed me. He was going to kill me with fire. Hey, 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 the king said as he took in my scared expression. It's okay. It's not going to hurt you. I didn't respond. His words did nothing to relax me. Why did he produce the fire if he wasn't going to use it to hurt me? You'll have to forgive me, the king said gently. I'm not going to harm you with it. I only wanted to see you better. I grew up around magic and forget that it can be shocking for those who have not witnessed it before. Shocking was an understatement. I couldn't stop staring at the ball of flames floating in his palm. It was brighter than any fire I had ever seen before and much hotter. I could feel its heat from all the way over here. How was his hand not burning? The king chuckled softly. My eyes snapped to his at the beautiful noise. He was smiling slightly, seemingly amused as he watched me. Had I done something amusing? Still watching me, the king slowly moved his free hand over the fire in a single movement, covering it completely with his palm for a moment before taking it away. When the fire was revealed again, I watched in wonder as it changed from its usual red and orange color to a bright, stupendous blue. The room around us changed. The blue flame cast diamond-like shadows all over the room. The colors of a rainbow painted the walls, moving around in refined dance that matched the flickering of the flame. It was beautiful, absolutely breathtaking. When my gaze fell back on the king, I noticed he was already watching me, a look of adoration on his face. I understood why he felt that way. If I had the ability to conjure up the blue flame he held in his hand, I would be proud of it too. I would constantly bathe myself in its rainbow colors. "Come here," the king's deep, soothing voice said. He gently grabbed my wrist and pulled me towards him. He turned my hand palm up, cupping it his own free one. He brought the blue flame towards me and, ever so slowly, tilted his hand down so that the flame moved towards my palm. When I realized he was trying to put the flame in my hand, I jerked back. The king's grip tightened slightly at my movement, stopping my attempt at fleeing. "Hey, it's okay," he said, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on the wrist he was holding. "Blue flames don't hurt." I met his eyes. His expression was sincere. "You can trust me." "I promise," he whispered. Not taking my eyes from his, I took a deep breath and nodded my head once, wordlessly telling him to continue. The king smiled and squeezed my wrist in a gentle manner before letting go of it completely. He cupped the flame in both hands and brought them over my upturned palm, gently placing the flame into my hand. I gasped at the strange feeling. I was expecting to feel the same sparks as I did when the king touched me, but this warmth was different. It was comforting, like what I imagined a mother's hug to feel like. I lifted my other hand and touched the top of the flame gently, watching the flames wrap around my fingers and flicker with my movements. The colors on the walls and ceilings changed too, dancing in sync with my touch. "Wow," I whispered in wonder. For a moment, I forgot where I was. For a moment, I didn't think about the rules or what the king would think of me and instead let myself get wrapped up in the magic I was holding in my hand. It consumed me, taking over my every thought and filling me with a happiness that I didn't know was possible. Without thinking, I touched the side of the ball with one finger and carefully turned it with my other hand in a fast swiping motion. It began to rapidly spin in my hand, throwing rainbows in every direction. Then, before it could stop spinning, I lifted the ball to my lips and blew. Like a leaf being carried off by the wind, the flame drifted from my hands and floated to the middle of the room, still turning. Then something new started to happen. The shadows the flame cast started to change into something else, creating different shapes and morphing until they resembled something familiar. The shape of a young girl appeared in the corner. I couldn't see her face or any of her features, only her shadow. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor with a rag. A man was standing next to her, the outline of his mouth moving, making it clear that he was yelling at the girl. Suddenly, the man's foot lifted and flew forward. The two figures disappeared before his boot connected with the girl's ribcage. Another shadow appeared on the other side of the room. It was the same girl as before, only this time she wasn't cleaning. She was standing in front of a woman much taller than her, looking down at what seemed to be a string that the woman was tying around her waist. They disappeared as well. Shadow after shadow began to appear and disappear all around us. All of the shadows formed silhouettes of the same girl at different points in her life. She was curled into a ball on the ground crying. She was sweeping. She was putting on a corset. She was watching the people around her eat, an empty plate and sitting in front of her. She was helping a young boy who had just fallen down in front of her, lifting him up and watching as he ran off. She was being whipped with long, hard strokes against her back. She was sleeping on the floor in a corner. She was smiling as she put a plate away, the last one she needed to clean for the day. One shadow, in particular, caught my eye. It was different from all the rest. In this one, the girl was standing behind a man who was much larger than her. He had his arm wrapped around her in a protective manner, pressing her into his back as he spoke to some other figures in the room. The girl was looking down at her fingers, studying them as they touched the man's back. She dropped her hands and leaned her forehead against his back. More shadows of the girl continued to appear, one after the other, showing random points of her life. My life. These were all moments from my past. I remembered all of them clearly. My gaze seemed to be automatically drawn to the shadows with the king in them. Surprisingly, there were a lot of him, even though I had only met him hours ago. I watched one of them, recognizing it from when we were in the bathroom just moments ago. I was sitting on the counter, as the king stood between my parted thighs, his large hands gripping my hips. He placed our foreheads together gently. Then, that same shadow of the king changed quickly, morphing into a different man, smaller than the king, but still extremely similar. Before I could look away, the shadow that was once the king grabbed me by the neck and slammed me into a wall. I watched in horror as he raised a knife he was holding and slammed the butt of it onto the top of my head with enough force to have me crumbling to the ground. I gasped and scrambled backward. I had no problem looking at what the other shadows had depicted, but the moment the shadow changed from the king to the beta Michael, something inside of me snapped. It was as if the king punishing me. The thought of him punishing me was more terrifying than I ever could have imagined. The king growled and I realized that he had been watching the same shadow as I was. With a flick of his wrist, the blue flame exploded with light. I had to look away and cover my eyes from the sudden brightness. When I looked back, the flame was once again its normal orange color. The shadows disappeared, much to my relief, taking with it the painful memories of my life. There was a long moment of silence, the only sound coming from the deep breathing of the king next to me. I could feel his eyes on me, scanning up and down my shaking form. Embarrassment filled me. How much of that had he seen? It was at that moment that I decided I would never mess with the king's magic again. Madame Melinda had told me countless times how evil magic is. Its only use is to cause harm. I knew that now. This was the first encounter I had ever had with magic, but it had drawn me in like nothing I'd ever experienced before. How did you do that? His deep voice filled the quiet room. I couldn't bring myself to respond to him. I was still in shock. A gentle hand touched my shoulder in the dark. How did you make the flame do that? The king asked again. I don't know, I whispered. He joined me on the bed and sat down next to me. It hit me that I was sitting on a bed and only a shirt with the most powerful man in the world, the king of werewolves. Never in a million years would I have thought I'd be here. At least, not alive. I want you to sleep here on the bed with me, he said. Is that okay? I was shocked to say the least. He wanted me to sleep on the bed? And even more confusing, he wanted to sleep here with me? That didn't make any sense. I had never, not once, slept on a bed in my entire life. Let alone one as nice as this one. And with the king of werewolves. But the king looked so tired, beyond ready to be done with me and go to sleep. I didn't want to ask any more questions when he looked so tired. I could sleep here if he wanted. I shouldn't be complaining anyway, it would be an amazing experience to sleep in a real bed for once. Choosing not to question him or complain, I nodded. I will sleep wherever you want me to. He didn't like that reply for some reason. He shook his head, never taking his eyes from me. No, I don't want you to agree with me because you are scared of the consequences if you don't. I want to know if you are truly okay with sleeping here with me. My mouth dropped slightly in shock. No one had ever asked me what I wanted. I was always just told what to do, never given a choice in the matter. But even knowing that he was giving me a choice, my answer doesn't change. I wasn't about to tell the Alpha King that I was too scared to sleep in the same bed with him. I was going to do whatever he wanted me to do. And he obviously wanted me here. I'm okay with it, I said, no hesitation in my voice. He let his lips form in a small smile. He nodded once, happy with my response. Thank goodness. He was the first to move, laying down on his back and looking at me expectantly. He pat the other side of the bed. Please. Let us sleep. I moved slowly, going as far over to the other side of the bed as I could be without falling off. I wanted to make sure he had enough room to sleep peacefully. Or maybe I should sleep at his feet? I tried to ignore the fact that the king had turned onto his side, placing his hand under his head and was watching my every move with amused curiosity. I wasn't sure why he was so interested in me. He was watching me like I was an animal at the zoo. I picked up the blanket and sheet from the bed and gently folded them over so that they were all on his side of the bed. The king's brows tugged together. I swallowed but continued when he didn't stop me. Next, I grabbed the pillows as well and placed them next to his head. I made eye contact with him as I sat back on my haunches. I gave him a nervous smile, hoping that my actions would please him. A slave that had a normal life before coming to work for the packhouse had once asked Madame Melinda if she could have a pillow and a blanket to sleep with. I still remember Madame Melinda's response clearly, even though I couldn't have been older than 10 at the time. She'd slapped the slave, saying she was ungrateful and shameful. "You are a disgusting human, worthless to this pack than the dirt on the bottom of my shoe," Madame Melinda had said. "You are lucky to have anything at all, ungrateful girl. We give you food and a bed and yet, you ask for more? You ask for a pillow? A blanket? As if you are worthy of such things." With that in my mind, I happily settled back down into the mattress. At least I knew that I had passed one of the tests that the king had set before me by making sure he would have all the pillows and blankets. I looked at him once more, making sure that was what he wanted. He met my gaze but didn't say anything, still only watching me. "Okay." I moved back to the edge of the bed and settled down onto my side, bringing my knees to my chest yet again. I wasn't expecting how comfortable it would be. I felt my body sink down into the plush bed as it formed perfectly to my side. I had to keep myself from moaning at the feeling. Is this what a real bed felt like? It felt like a dream. I was seriously missing out. Suddenly, I heard the king shifting behind me. Covers were moved and the bed dipped slightly. He was close to me. Very close. And then his hand was wrapped around my waist and gently tugging me back towards him. I let out a small shriek of terror. "Hey, SH. He whispered, his lips pressing against my ear. He pulled me so that my back was flush against his front. He kept one arm securely wrapped around my waist, his huge hand splayed over my stomach, and the other arm bent and under my head, acting as a pillow. "You're okay," he continued whispering in my ear. He left a gentle kiss there. "You're okay. I promise you're okay." I couldn't do anything other than stay completely still against him. Completely still except for the uncontrollable shaking that I hoped he wouldn't notice. Everything about the king felt so hard and warm behind me. His body wrapped around mine so easily, like second nature, that it made me wonder how many girls he had been in this position with. For some reason, I didn't like that thought. Without my permission, my mind began analyzing the feeling of his body against mine, basking in how absolutely incredible he felt against me. Even though I knew that I shouldn't be wishing for this due to obvious reasons, I still found myself hoping that this wouldn't be the last time that someone held me. This is what I had been missing in my life. I needed to be held, needed to feel physical contact, needed to feel affection from another human being even if it wasn't sincere. The king let out a hot chuckle against my neck that reminded me of where I was. "I know, baby. I like touching you too," he said in a deep, husky voice that sent shivers down my spine. He hugged me closer to him and moved his leg so that it was between mine, causing more physical contact. I froze. Had I said that out loud? How embarrassing. The king didn't need to know that no one had touched me in so long that I would now do anything for just a little physical contact. I'm sorry," I said. I didn't mean to say that out loud. He left a lingering kiss against the back of my neck and laughed again. "You didn't say anything, little one. There was no need. It was your body's reaction to being in my arms that told me all that I needed to know. Your breathing calmed, your heart rate slowed, your mind began to wander." He paused. His lips pressed harder against my neck as he spoke his next words. "You squirmed your little body against me, trying to get closer." "Oh," I said, completely mortified. Had I really done all of those things? "I apologize. I hadn't meant to do any of that, I promise." "I am so sorry." "I know you didn't mean to do any of it," he whispered. "But that didn't mean my wolf and I didn't love it." He liked that? He liked that I enjoyed being pressed against him, squirming against him as if I'm using his body for my own selfish benefit? Curiosity flowed through my body, curiosity and just the tiniest bit of pride. I had made someone else happy. Even if it was originally for my own benefit, I had still done something right. I had received praise for it, something I had never received in my entire life. It felt so good. Good enough for me to press my body back against him once again, moving my butt a little in the way he had described as squirming. He groaned loudly in my ear. "That's right, baby girl." His hold tightened around me. Suddenly, I felt something hard and long grow behind me, pressing up against my backside. Did the king have a third leg? That would be extremely strange. "Fuck," he growled out. He began joining in on my movements, rotating his hips against mine. It was like our bodies were in sync, moving together as one. It was strange how much I loved it. Abruptly, the king growled loudly. He shoved me away from him just hard enough that I flew a few feet towards the other side of the bed. I gasped when the sudden movement sent burning pain through my ribs and black dots dancing behind my eyelids. Fighting through the pain, I turned my body quickly, looking for the king. He was standing on the other side of the room, facing away from me, breathing in and out harshly as he tried to rein in his wolf. Fear and sadness coursed through me like a freight train as I watched him. I thought he had liked me touching him. I thought he had liked holding me. But I knew now that I was wrong. So wrong. He was livid with me, pacing back and forth across the room, never-ending growls spilling from his heaving chest. I had failed yet another test. God, how stupid could I be? And what was even worse, not only did I feel ashamed for what I had done, I felt completely devastated over his reaction. Somewhere deep inside me had been hoping, praying even, that there was someone out there willing to like me. I wasn't even asking for love or blind devotion. I just wanted the king to like me, that was all. There was something about his gorgeous ocean-like eyes that drew me in from the moment I saw him and made me desperately hope for his approval over me, more than I had hoped for it with any other person before. But, of course, I was wrong. No one would ever care for me. Let alone love me. I was just an ugly, fat, destructive human not worthy of life. Feeling numb to the world, I crawled from the bed and tucked my knees under me on the floor. I bowed my head and pressed it against the floor, going back into the position of submission that I had spent much of tonight in. I didn't cry, I didn't say anything. I just simply let myself fall into an abyss of black and cold. I had officially given up. It took a few minutes, but I finally heard the king calm down and take in a deep breath. I was confused by the fact that he hadn't punished me for my stupidity touching a king paw. Are you kidding me, 20? But I let it drift from my mind. I was done being confused. I was done wondering what I did wrong. Everything I do is wrong. The panicked voice of the king rang through the room. Baby, he yelled. I simply breathed in deeply, at peace with my decision to give up. He could do whatever he wanted with me now. Whatever he wanted and I wouldn't flinch. I could hear him smelling the room before his thunderous footsteps came marching towards my form. Oh, baby, he said in a sad tone as he looked down at me. Pathetic, I know, I thought. He bent down and gently picked me up. I stayed limp in his arms as he brought me over to the bed and tucked me into his lap. He pressed his nose into my hair. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Truly. You have no idea how sorry I am. I promise it's not what you think. I kept my head bowed and my lips together. I was so tired. Mentally, physically, to the bone tired. Please just kill me, I whispered. His body instantly stiffened at my words, informing me that he didn't like what I was saying. Begging for him to end my life may have been low and cowardly, but, at that moment, I didn't care. What did you just say? He growled. My eyes met his and, although I felt numb, I couldn't stop myself from feeling the tiniest bit of fear when I saw the fury in his expression. I asked you to kill me. I am pleading with you not to wait any longer, I said. He growled loudly. I am not going to kill you, he said, his tone like gravel. Please, your majesty, I begged, desperation strong in my voice. I can't handle any more tests. I cannot go to sleep now, knowing that tomorrow will be like this. I have known for a long time that I would die due to my lack of intelligence and inability to follow rules or do things right. I know that what I have done tonight has finally tipped the scale. I ask you, plead with you to have mercy on me, your majesty. Do not wait any longer. Although I know my infringements may be grave, creating cause for a drawn-out death, I beg you not to play with me anymore. I do not deserve to be in this world any longer, this world where I cause so much unhappiness to others and to you. Please end my life so that my misery and unhappiness I cause others and myself may end. The king didn't move for some time after my short speech. In fact, he processed my words without any sort of violence or growling for the first time that night. I found myself wondering, had I finally said the right thing? Was he going to grant my wish? But as a few more seconds ticked by without any sort of answer, I couldn't stop myself from looking up in curiosity. And what I saw when I met the king's eyes was what surprised me most that night. The king was crying. Large tears were rolling from his eyes and down to his neck, He took in a deep breath when he saw me look up. He opened his mouth and then closed it, looking for the right thing to say. Finally, he asked, "You thought I was going to kill you?" I nodded without hesitation. There is no other punishment worthy of upsetting the king. His brows came together in confusion. "You didn't upset me." I frowned. "I apologize, my king, I do not mean to disagree with you or correct you, but I am most certain I did upset you. You have almost shifted multiple times tonight, each shift caused by something I did or said." He touched my cheek gently and immediately shook his head. No, baby girl. None of my anger was caused by you. Not one bit. I can't believe that you've gone this entire night thinking that it was. I was angry because of the horrors that have been inflicted upon you by this monstrosity of a pack. My heart rate picked up. You are mad at my pack? I would have much rather he be mad at me. I owed everything to my pack. They had cared for me since I was a child, clothed me, fed me, provided me with work. I would be dead if not for them. I couldn't let the werewolf king be mad at my pack for something that I had done. Please, your majesty. I apologize for making any sort of requests of you, but please do not bring harm to my pack because of my stupidity. It is not their fault for training such a disobedient slave like myself. They truly trained me well. It is I who have failed to listen. Any punishment should be inflicted upon me. Trained you? The king barked out. You call what they did to you training? I flinched. I swallowed down my tears. You are correct, your majesty. There is no evidence of training in my actions or in my seemingly continuous need to argue with you and talk out of turn. And for that, I am unbelievably sorry. But this is not my pack's fault. It was I who did not listen. It is I who made the decisions that lead to the situation we are in now. This is why I beg of you to kill me and not bring harm upon my pack. Please, your majesty. No, the king said immediately. No, that's not, he sighed in frustration, running a hand down his face. I am not mad because of your behavior. You have done nothing wrong. I will repeat that until you believe it. You have done nothing wrong. I am mad due to your pack's despicable treatment of their so-called slaves. I am mad because they hurt you, beat you, whipped you, and did goddess knows what else. I am mad because of the pain they have caused you and the other humans in this pack. His thumb brushed over my cheekbone lightly as he continued to hold me. I hate the fact that you are hurt. I hate the fact that you have scars and bruises and cuts all across your body. That is why I've almost shifted tonight. Because the pain that you have had to endure is not deserved. I am mad at myself for not being here sooner to stop it. I opened my mouth to speak, but he clasped his palm over my lips, successfully silencing me. I do not want to hear you say you deserved it, he said in a stern voice. My eyes widened. How had he known I was going to say that? Listen to me well, my love, because what I am about to say next is extremely important. There is nothing that you can do or say that warrants the appalling things your pack has done to you. Absolutely nothing, you hear me? I know that you have been taught that you are less than for as long as you have worked here, but it is not true. And as I said before, I am going to dedicate every day of the rest of my life to ensuring that you know your worth. His hand moved slowly off my mouth when he was done speaking. His eyes studied me as he awaited my response with patience. I couldn't stop the next words that came out of my mouth. You don't want to kill me? I asked, hope leaking from my tone. I knew it was stupid to ask such a thing, but I couldn't stop the longing inside of me for it to be true. His expression softened. No, my love. I could never even consider harming a single hair on your head, let alone killing you. Relief like I had never felt before coursed through me. I wasn't sure why I believed him, but I did. He wasn't going to kill me. I would live through the night. An uncontrollable sob crawled up my throat and came spilling out of my lips without my consent. It was loud and sloppy and filled with relief. I slapped a hand over my mouth as I stared into the eyes of the king. Perhaps I would only come out of this beaten. I had never felt happier in my entire life. His face softened as he watched me break down in relief in his arms. Oh, baby, he said quietly. He pulled me gently into his chest and tucked me under his chin. My body was racked with sobs and shaking breathing, but the king just hugged me close and ran a hand up and down my back. I couldn't believe that I was seeking comfort from the king of the supernatural. There was just something about the way his skin felt on mine that made me never want to disconnect from him. He kept whispering how sorry he was in my ear, soothing me with his calm, deep voice. I couldn't believe how much I loved the sound of his voice. I had to remind myself that, as much as I loved the way his skin felt against mine and his voice sounded in my ear, I couldn't let myself become attached to the king. He was trained in social interactions and dealing with people. He would know how to comfort a subject in need even if it was just a worthless human. That's what made him an amazing king, a worthy ruler. But that didn't mean that he liked me. He was just doing his job. It must be been at least 20 minutes before I finally calmed down and realized just how close I was to the king. I leaned back and wiped the tears away from my eyes. I tried to scramble off of his lap, but he held me there with his strong hands on my waist. He grabbed my chin and tilted my head up to look at him. So this entire night, he said quietly, you thought I was planning on killing you? And you were just going to let that happen? I nodded my head slowly. He leaned his head back onto the headboard behind him with a large sigh of anger. No wonder you were so scared. He looked back at me. I am not going to kill you. I am not going to hurt you. In fact, no one is ever going to hurt you ever again, you have my word. And I am so sorry that I have let you go the night thinking that and being in so much fear. I opened my mouth to question him, but I shut it quickly. I have taken far too many liberties tonight when it came to speaking out of turn with the king. He may not want to kill me now, but that didn't mean he wouldn't want to in the future. No, please tell me what you were going to say, the king said when he noticed my actions. Remember what we spoke about earlier? Always speak your mind around me even if you think I won't like what you were going to say. Well, if he says so. What about the poison? I asked in a timid voice. His body stiffened. What poison? He asked. His eyes ran down my body in what seemed to be a panic as he inspected every inch of me. Has someone poisoned you? I was a bit put off by his actions. The poison you put on my knees earlier, I explained. In the bathroom. He gave me a confused look. You mean when I tended to the wounds on your legs? Tended? I repeated. I had never heard that word before. You put something clear on my legs that you said was going to hurt. Yes, I used rubbing alcohol to clean your wounds and then healing ointment to help make them heal quicker and to make the pain stop. I said it would hurt, but I only meant for a second. He looked down at my knees in concern. Does it still hurt? I shook my head. No, it only hurt for a second like you had said. I dropped my gaze from him, looking down at my fidgeting hands. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I didn't know what you were doing. I feel very stupid now. No one has ever tended me before. He lifted my chin yet again. You're not stupid. Of course you're not stupid. Don't ever say that. You were scared. He paused for a moment. He searched my eyes with a sad expression. You really thought that I had poisoned you? Madame Melinda poisoned me once when I was a child. The pain from the poison started as bearable but then grew and grew until I swallowed hard, the memory overtaking me. I remembered screaming and crying on the floor, rolling around in misery while other slaves walked past me without sparing me a single glance. The pain must have lasted at least a day. I looked back at the king who was waiting for me to finish with an intense expression that I couldn't read. The pain was just really bad, I continued, choosing not to go into detail. I thought that was what you were doing with the scrapes on my knees. It would be smart to apply that kind of poison to an already open wound as it would surely be more painful. You might consider even telling Madame Melinda about it so that she can use it on me the next time I misbehave. That would surely remind me of my place. Something in what I said to upset the king greatly because, the next thing I knew, I was being harshly slammed back into his heaving chest as his growling commenced once again. The presence of his wolf became clear. No one is ever going to hurt you again, he growled in a voice more wolf than human. I sat frozen in his arms, waiting for him to calm down. I had spent enough time with the king to know that it took him a few minutes to calm down when his wolf tried to take over his body. As anticipated, the king's breathing slowed after a few minutes and his body stopped shaking. He took a few more deep breaths before he removed his head from my hair and looked at me with sad eyes. I met his gaze with curiosity and fear. You've been through so much, he whispered. He touched the bruise on my cheek lightly. You've been fighting your entire life and don't even know it. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. The things he said made no sense. I'm here now, the king continued. I'm here and I am going to take care of you. Never again will you be treated like a slave or as if you don't matter. You're mine. My mate. Mate? Out of all the things he had said tonight, this had to be the strangest. Mate? As in a werewolf's destined one and only lover? I looked behind me. Had someone else entered the room? His mate would not be happy if they walked into the king's bedroom and saw another woman sitting on his lap, wearing his clothes. I looked back to the king after scanning the room and finding no one. Who's your mate? Is she here? I asked quietly, trying to mask my fear. His brows came together and he pulled me closer to his chest. Of course she's here. She's sitting on my lap. I looked down at the legs I was sitting on and then back at him. But I'm sitting on your lap. His mouth opened slightly in shock and then he leaned his head back against the headboard and let out a humorless laugh. Of course. It all makes sense now. You didn't know. He shook his head and then looked back at me with soft eyes that made my breath catch in my throat. Baby, he spoke gently, touching my face lightly and running his thumb over the cheekbone that wasn't bruised. You're my mate. I paused. Me? Had I heard him right? No, surely I didn't because what he said made absolutely no sense. He thought I was his mate? I almost laughed out loud at the thought. I said nothing at first, waiting for him to laugh and say it was a joke. But he never did. After a few seconds of silence and his soft expression never changing as he seemed to patiently wait for me to process the news, I realized he truly believed his words. He was serious. He really thought I was his mate. Me, a pathetic human. Suddenly, it all made sense. The king thought I was his mate. This was why he hadn't killed me yet. This was why he was being so nice to me. This was why he was giving me the first sort of affection I'd ever receive in my life. He had made a mistake and was now disillusioned into thinking that a slave was worthy of his time due to some sort of connection between our souls that wasn't actually there. Without thinking, my next word spilled from my mouth. No. The king was obviously taken aback. He scowled darkly and his grip on my hips tightened. What do you mean no? I swallowed, suddenly aware that I had upset him yet again. That had not been my intention. Stupid, stupid girl. The voice in my head said. I looked down. Well, I took in a shaky breath. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it as if I was disagreeing with you. I could feel his body begin to shake, his wolf becoming more and more present with each word I said. Was I really about to correct the king again? I just meant that I think you've maybe made a mistake? Yep, I guess I was. He growled under his breath, the noise low and threatening. Oh, he asked, deadly calm. How so? I fidgeted nervously. Did I really want to tell him that I wasn't his mate and give up this affection and safety that he was offering me? There was something deep down in me desperately wanting it to be true. Mates were kind to each other. They took care of each other. They loved each other unconditionally. That's all I had ever longed for in my life. If I didn't tell him I wasn't his mate, he might bring me to the palace and let me work there. Based on the way he had treated me tonight, slaves at the palace were treated much better than the ones here. He could use me as he wished, interacting with me whenever he wanted to or needed release, and I could, in return, be the best slave he had ever had. That life would be much better than the one I had here, waiting until the day I would be given to some mean old wolf who would surely treat me much worse than the king would. I looked up slowly to meet the king's kind, deep blue eyes. He was still watching me closely, waiting patiently for my response. His patience with me only reminded me of how kind he had been to me tonight. He had cared for me even when I didn't deserve it. He said kind things and made me feel as if I mattered for the first time in my entire life, even if they were said under false pretenses. If this was how life with him would be, I wouldn't mind having him as my mate. In fact, I would love it. I shoved those thoughts out of my head, horrified with myself. What was wrong with me? How could I possibly even consider staying with the king? I couldn't lie to him. He deserved better. I knew that. He deserved so much better than a human slave girl starved for attention, posing to be his mate for her own selfish benefit. Yes, he was kind and loving, and I would miss that even if I only experienced it for one night, but his kind heart only meant he was more deserving of a better mate. His real mate. Not me. I swallowed. I'm not your mate, your majesty, I said, surprised by how hard it was to get those words out. They tasted like vinegar on my tongue. The king growled once again, louder this time, but I continued before he could talk. There has been some sort of mistake. Perhaps you are smelling the scent of one of the werewolves of this pack on me. The king scowled. You think the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the world, would make a mistake when finding his mate? You think my wolf would make that mistake? I immediately shook my head. He was right, that sounded stupid. No. No, of course not, I said frantically. I just mean. What did I mean? I took in a deep breath. I just mean I'm not your mate. I just can't be. Still scowling, the king reached for a piece of my blonde hair and began to play with it between his fingers. His other hand moved from my hip to my leg, squeezing my thigh gently. This seemed to calm him a bit, although I wasn't sure why. Tell me why you think that, baby. I shrugged. The way he was touching me was distracting me. It made me nervous, my insecurities racing forward. Why did he like touching me so much? My body was broken, covered in bruises and scars. Absolutely disgusting. Disgusting. However, at the same time, I liked the way his skin felt against mine. I liked the sparks that came from his fire powers. They felt nice. Shivers ran down my spine. I licked my dry lips, trying to ignore his hand that was moving up and down my thigh. I'm a human, I said, hoping he would accept this obvious reason as a valid explanation. Perhaps he didn't know I was human. You think a werewolf and a human haven't been paired together before? The king asked. He seemed to be calming down now, his blue eyes turning lighter. Species don't matter when it comes to soulmates. Mates are put together when they are perfect for each other, when they are meant to be in each other's lives. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. None of this made any sense. He was right, he wouldn't make a mistake when finding his mate, of that, I was certain. But I was also 100% certain that I wasn't his mate, that I couldn't be his mate. Could you imagine me on his arm during royal ceremonies? Ugly, short, fat me standing next to this gorgeous, kind man, acting as if I had any sort of right being there? Never. My mouth opened and closed multiple times as I fished for something else to say, some way to convince him he was wrong without offending him. I'm a slave, I said. He scowled, watching his hand that was still playing with my hair. Yes, don't remind me. That fact upsets me to no end, he growled out. My heart dropped a bit. So it did bother him that I was a slave. My shoulders sagged a bit. But none of that matters now, he continued. I couldn't care less about your past, which you had no control over. I'm here now and I am going to take care of you. The people who have hurt you will pay for their actions. And you shall never know pain again. Of that, I can promise. I was, to say the least, completely dumbfounded. I didn't deserve to be taken care of, didn't he know that? But I started, trying to come up with something else to say. He seemed so sure of himself, so sure I was his mate. There had to be a way to convince him that he was wrong. But I... The king sighed. He leaned forward and kissed my forehead, running a hand down my hair in a soothing manner. Forgive me, my love. I have handled my first interactions with you completely wrong. I forgot that humans don't feel the mate bond as strongly as werewolves do. I've mistreated you tonight. You are scared and confused. And rightly so. I have done a terrible job at explaining to you what is going on. It's not an excuse, but I'm processing the night's events just as much as you are. It's not every day that you find your mate. Especially under these circumstances. He sighed, his eyes darkening. What circumstances? Was he talking about me being human? A slave? He suddenly shook his head, as if trying to clear his thoughts, and looked back at me. A soft smile formed on his lips as he studied me. Especially when my mate is as beautiful as you. There he goes again, with the kind words that I didn't deserve. Would he be mad when he figured out that I wasn't his mate and that he had wasted all of his nice words on some pathetic slave girl? Would he finally decide to kill me? None of this needs to be dealt with right now. He tucked the piece of hair he had been playing with behind my ear. You are obviously tired and need time to process all that I am telling you. You need sleep in order to recover from the emotional trauma I have put you through tonight. He laid back on the bed, hugging me to his chest so that I was looking up at him with my head on his chest. Do you think you can do that, my beautiful mate? Go to sleep? Or would you rather stay up and talk some more? I am happy to answer any and all of your questions. I didn't know what I wanted. No, that was wrong. I wanted a lot of things. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to crawl into a hole somewhere and never leave. Or maybe I wanted to cry. Or maybe I really did want to sleep. The king said nothing else when I didn't respond, taking my silence as an answer. He laid me down next to him and pulled me close to his body so that our noses were almost touching. One of his legs settled between mine and the arm that wasn't wrapped around my waist moved underneath my head, acting as a pillow. Even though the intimate position made me nervous, I couldn't deny how comfortable I was. The king had only been asleep for about 45 minutes when the clock on the bedside table told me that it was time to go start my chores. I practically glared at the clock as I willed it to go back in time just a few more minutes so that I could stay in this cloud-like bed, with the king's amazing, sparky arms wrapped around me. I didn't think I could be any more comfortable than I was at that moment. It felt like a dream. Maybe it was. I knew that the king had told me to sleep, but my nerves were too high for that. So, instead, I just watched as he fell asleep, his face relaxing, his breathing evening. Even while he was asleep, his arms didn't loosen their hold on me. His grip on me was so tight that I was worried he was upset with me somehow. But even if that were the case, I didn't want him to let go of me. The sparks coming from his body due to his powers of fire felt absolutely amazing. Everywhere my body touched him felt warm and content. I almost snuggled in deeper but decided against it, not wanting to risk waking him. I spent hours like that, watching him sleep. Content to just lie there in his arms but not able to find any peace for myself. When morning rolled around, I felt my nerves rising again. I sighed softly when yet another minute passed on and I still hadn't gotten out of the bed. I was officially 2 minutes late to making breakfast for the pack. I'd never shown up any later than 10 minutes early. I could only hope that no one would notice. I swallowed and tried to summon as much courage as I could muster before I began to move gently out of the king's embrace. At first, he was not happy with my movements, even in his sleep. His brows pulled together and he tugged me back to his chest so abruptly that I couldn't stop the small squeak that left my mouth. But I didn't let that stop me, knowing that even the king, as content as he seemed to be with me in his bed now, would want his breakfast and would not be happy if it was not prepared on time because I decided to sleep in. It took about 20 more minutes and the king tugging me back to his chest each time I tried to move away before I was finally able to get out of the bed. I would have been proud that I had done it without waking him up, but I had much more pressing matters on my mind. Without wasting a second, I quietly ran over to where my uniform from yesterday was still pulled on the floor and snatched it up, then ran to the bathroom. I was faintly aware of the fact that I hadn't been given permission to be in his bathroom but ignored it. There was no way I was wasting any more time by going all the way down to the slaves' quarters and getting dressed there. After using the toilet, I quickly tugged on my uniform and took a moment to inspect myself in the mirror before throwing my hair back into a tight bun. My uniform was wrinkled, my hair was ratty after not using a brush, there were huge bags under my eyes and tear stains on my cheeks, my black eye only seemed to be more swollen, and I probably smelled horrible after not having showered for almost 3 days nor a toothbrush to brush my teeth. I had never looked this bad. No wonder the king didn't want to have sex with me last night. No one would. Even when he thought I was his mate, he didn't want me. That's because you're disgusting, said the voice in my head. My shoulders sagged with a sigh, my heart feeling tight. I couldn't let myself think about it for long. It hurt too much and I had other things to do. As quickly as I could, I grabbed the king's shirt that he had let me use last night, as well as the boxers that didn't fit, and washed them in the sink with some hand soap. I wish I could have taken them down to the wash in order to properly clean them, but I didn't know if the king would be okay with me taking them out of the room. Once they were clean and hopefully free of my dirty scent, I draped the clothes across the top of the shower curtain rod, hoping that the king would assume I would be back for them later to properly clean them in the wash along with his other clothes. Doing his laundry was the least I could do after he was so kind to me last night and decided not to kill me after all of my disobedience. Once all of that was done, I smoothed down my uniform and left the bathroom. I spared the king a nervous glance. He was tossing and turning in the bed, not looking nearly as happy and comfortable as when I left him. However, he was still deeply asleep and seemed to be dreaming, which made me feel a little more relieved. Whatever he was dreaming about couldn't he have been good because he was frowning and mumbling something incoherent that was accompanied by loud growls. Before I could stop myself, I found myself taking a step toward him, picturing my hand smoothing the angry wrinkles from his face. When I was in front of him, I knelt down next to his bed so that my face was level with his. He looked so exhausted. I hoped he would sleep for several more hours. He looked like he was about to wake up and I definitely did not want that. Be calm, I whispered to him in a voice quiet enough not to wake him. And sleep. Sleep until you are rested. And thank you for your kindness last night. At my words, the king's body relaxed and his face loosened. His growling and twitching stopped as well. I smiled. Averting my eyes from the king's sleeping form with more difficulty than expected, I forced myself to tiptoe to the door and let myself out. There were already werewolves in the kitchen when I came sprinting in. I gasped when I felt their eyes on me and dropped to the ground and bare my neck in submission. In a flash, I was being shoved into the wall behind me, held off the ground by a hand around my neck. Of course. Who do you think you are, huh? A man whose voice I recognized as Johnny S., one of the members of this pack, said. His grip on my throat tightened and I gasped for air. I willed myself to keep my hands at my sides instead of clawing at his arm like I desperately wanted to so that I wouldn't be punished. Johnny and his friends were always the first people to come to breakfast every day after they went for a morning run. He never spoke to me or looked in my direction unless I did something wrong. But even then, he was still one of the scariest wolves of the pack. He and his friends were all warriors, strong, large, and agile. In other words, very capable of tearing me to shreds. They had only hit me a handful of times and I considered that to be a victory. Today, however, I knew I would not be so lucky. Look at her uniform, another wolf, Jacob, said. Someone is slacking today. I continued to keep my gaze down and my mouth shut as I tried my best to gasp for air. Black dots were starting to cloud my vision. Wait a second, Johnny said. Do you guys smell that? Johnny's nose went to my neck and inhaled deeply. She smells like another wolf. A male. His scent is all over her. Another wolf approached me and inhaled my scent as well. Surprise laced his tone. It's fresh too. She just came from him. I could feel Johnny's gaze searching my face, which I had no doubt was turning purple. You were with someone, huh? He asked in a smooth, slow voice. I thought she was off limits though, Jacob said. I thought they were saving her to sell her. Johnny's free hand came up to smooth the loose hair away from my face. His touch felt like sandpaper against my skin and left me feeling disgusting. I did too, he replied. I could hear his smirk. Seems like the whore just couldn't wait for some werewolf cock. The hand around my neck dropped and I went tumbling to the floor in a coughing mess. However, before I could fall completely, Johnny's body pressed against mine, forcing me up against the wall yet again. His hand settled on my butt and squeezed roughly. Wait, Jacob interrupted. He paused for a moment. What if she found her mate? Johnny laughed. Then she has been rejected. No one would want her. The likelihood of her having a mate is low. The moon goddess would never be that cruel. No, she has been fucking someone else. It's the only explanation. Jacob didn't say anything else. He obviously agreed with him. Listen here, slut, Johnny's deep voice spat in my ear. Now that I know you'll basically do anything for some dick like the whore you are, he bit down on my ear, drawing blood with his sharp canines. You better know I'll be taking advantage, he whispered. Fear flooded my body. He couldn't mean what I thought he meant, could he? Ah, look, the little human likes that idea, Johnny continued. She is getting all flushed and squirmy. I wanted nothing more than to shove him off of me and tell him how wrong he was. But I knew I couldn't do that. That would just cause a harsher beating. I was already having trouble breathing and couldn't risk any more injuries. Johnny pressed himself closer to me and started to grind himself slowly against my hips in a way that made my skin crawl and my stomach churn. You want my cock in your pussy, slut? You want to suck me off? Is that what you've been craving all these years? His friend laughed behind him. I could hear his heavy, panting breathing as well as he watched the entire scene. What do you think, Jacob? Do you think the whore's pussy is wet? Johnny asked the man behind him. He touched my throat again, trailing a finger down it until he reached my breast and palmed it aggressively. I think so. I swallowed hard, feeling tears racing down my cheeks as I continued to gasp for air. There was no doubt in my mind that they were talking about taking my virginity. They didn't know that the scent all over my body was the result of my completely innocent night spent with the king. They thought that I had slept with a werewolf, officially making my body up for grabs. I wished I could speak to them and explain myself, but I hadn't been given permission to talk. Johnny licked up my neck before stopping at my ear. Here's how things are going to work from now on. Whenever I or one of my friends needs any of our needs met, you're the one who's going to help. You're going to offer up that sweet pussy. His hand palmed my middle roughly, making me gasp in fear, day or night, whenever we want. No arguments. Am I clear? I was frozen. I couldn't move. Johnny grabbed my jaw in his huge hand and squeezed, slamming my head into the wall. It made contact with the bruise I had, stars dancing in my vision. I said, "Am I clear, slut?" I nodded my head quickly, giving him all the confirmation he needed. He spat in my face, his saliva hitting me in the eye. Then he dropped me and shoved me toward the kitchen so that I fell to my knees with a painful thump. I whimpered when my knees touched the ground, not because of the pain but because I could feel the wounds that the king had tended last night open up again, the wrappings beginning to loosen. "We'll keep your disobedience a secret for now," Johnny said, obviously talking about the fact that I was late to making breakfast. He laughed as he watched me scramble off the floor in a panic. "But you better know you'll be paying me back for my generosity in another way. Soon." I padded back to the slave's quarters after making breakfast for the pack, feeling exhausted beyond belief. I had other chores to do, but I convinced myself that they could wait 15 minutes. My eyelids were drooping and my body felt as though it was filled with lead. All I wanted to do was to sleep, if only for a little while. Everything that Johnny said to me back in the kitchen kept running through my mind, repeating over and over again. I couldn't stop imagining him grabbing me in the middle of the night, tying me to his bed, and doing whatever he wanted with me. He would pass me around to his friends as I screamed and fought. I would be completely and utterly helpless. He was so much bigger, stronger than I was. I would be too scared to speak, let alone fight. Why was the idea of the king being the one to take my virginity so much less terrifying than if Johnny were the one to do it? I hadn't felt this nervous or sick last night when the king said he was bringing me to his bed. Don't get me wrong, I was still terrified beyond belief, but I somehow felt better about giving my virginity to the king. If I had to give it to someone, I would choose him. The fear I was feeling was so much different than the fear I felt last night. I felt like I was going to puke, my entire body visibly shaking, my heart racing in my throat. I rounded each corner with hesitancy as if Johnny would be on the other side, ready to take me away. When I finally made my way into the slaves' quarters, I was relieved to find it empty. Everyone else was off doing their chores just like I should have been. I would get in such huge trouble if anybody knew that I was down here. But I wouldn't make it through the rest of the day if I didn't take at least 5 minutes to sit and process all that had happened in the last 24 hours. I was already on the verge of collapsing. I found my usual spot on the floor and pressed my back into the corner, curling up into a tight ball. I didn't change clothes. My uniform was already covered in blood and dirt past the point of saving. I would receive a beating for ruining it, but that was a worry for another time. The concrete felt cool against my skin. I pressed my cheek closer to it. My chest was tight with the need to cry, but I suppressed my tears. I could be strong for another day. And then I would be strong again tomorrow. Yeah, right. You are weak. 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 I was on the verge of sleep when a feral growl shook the pack house and made my heart nearly leap from my chest. "Evangeline," a voice boomed. I wasn't sure how, but I knew that the voice belonged to the king. The name, however, I didn't recognize. I sprang into a sitting position and looked toward the door. The adrenaline that I thought I had run out of after the events of last night came slamming back into my body with incredible force. I was no longer tired but nervous about what had upset the king. Whoever this Claire was must have done something really bad. The king sounded livid. Fast pounding of feet could be heard throughout the pack house. The king was running. And it was clear he had shifted. His wolf was on the loose. I held my breath as I listened to the sound of his footsteps getting louder and louder. He was getting closer. Where was he going? Who was Claire? And what on earth could she have done to cause this sort of reaction from the king? I could hear people screaming as the king continued his rampage throughout the packhouse in search of this girl. Fear coursed through me. Without thinking, I quickly crawled beneath a nearby bed, curling into a ball and covering my ears from the terrifying noises. The king's loud steps were getting closer and closer to the basement, which I was sure surprised everyone in the packhouse, including me. The lower you were in the packhouse, the lower rank you were. Where could he be going? Suddenly, I heard the sound of the king's growling wolf sprinting onto the floor that I was on, the slave's floor. A quiet gasp escaped my mouth. What on earth was he doing down here? Only pathetic human slaves came down here. This was no place for a king. Then, another thought occurred to me. I was the only person down here. Everyone else was doing their chores. It was just me and the king. Could it be that he knew I wasn't doing my chores? That I chose to take a moment to sleep instead? The thought made my heart drop to the bottom of my stomach. He was here to finally punish me, wasn't he? Without warning, the king came sprinting into the room, snarling and growling as if he were about to attack. I couldn't even bring myself to look at him from beneath the bed, far too terrified. I kept still and tried to stop my gasping breaths from being too loud, even though I knew it was pointless to try and hide from him. He would be able to smell me no matter where I was. He knew I was here. And now, he got to decide what to do with me. For a moment, the room was completely silent. It almost made me wonder if he had left. Then, the bed I was beneath went flying across the room, revealing me to the livid wolf who had just thrown it with its teeth. I shrieked in surprise. Before I could stop myself, my eyes met those of the king's wolf. He was looking down at me, his intense, black eyes piercing into me. I couldn't believe how huge he was. He was by far the biggest wolf I had ever seen. He was even larger than a wolf. Oh God, I was going to die, wasn't I? The king huffed as he looked down at me, his eyes scanning my entire body slowly. I was still on my side, curled into a tight ball. My dress had ridden up, revealing my underdress to the king once again. I realized then that I wasn't following the rules. First, I was meeting the king's eyes as if I was somehow worthy of being in his presence. And, second, I wasn't on my knees or bowing my head to him. If Madame Melinda could see me right now, I didn't even want to think of what she would do to me. Quickly coming to my senses, I pushed past my all-consuming fear and began to slowly, tentatively move into the position of submission. My body felt weak and shaky as I moved, as if I were filled with rocks instead of blood and bone. I thought of apologizing to the king, but I wasn't sure if I had permission to. I brought myself into a sitting position and was about to bring my legs beneath to bow, but was stopped. The king gently placed one of his giant paws on my arm and made a strange whimpering noise. I froze. Then, ever so slowly, he pressed his nose against my chest and pushed. I was embarrassed by the fact that I knew the king could feel my chest rising and falling with suppressed sobs, but I couldn't do anything about it. The king continued to press his nose on my chest until I was falling backwards so that I was lying on the floor on my back. Then he stepped above me, placing his legs on either side of me. He looked down at me. I tried to look anywhere but his eyes, reminding myself that I had overstepped my boundaries by looking at him once already, so, instead, I shut my eyes tightly. Tears fell soundlessly down my cheeks. I hated how quiet he was while he stood above me, staring down at me. I found it so hard to read him. What was he doing here? What did he want with me? After another long moment, something warm and wet touched my neck. I jumped in shock at the strange feeling. The king was licking me. It occurred to me that he was licking the part of my neck that was bruised from Johnny's harsh grip this morning. I sucked in a breath. He knew I had been punished. I wondered what he thought of me. He probably thinks you deserved it. The king growled quietly as he continued to lick every part of my neck until it was successfully covered in his saliva. But he didn't stop there. He continued to lick down my neck, to the tops of my breasts, and then down my hands and basically any other part of me that wasn't covered by my dress. I kept still the entire time, save for my trembling. My eyes remained shut too. I wasn't sure what was going on, why he was licking me, but I had no plans to stop him. He could do whatever he wanted to me and I wouldn't stop him. When the licking eventually ceased, the sound of cracking bones was heard. I shut my eyes tighter in anticipation. The king was shifting back to his human form. I waited several long seconds in silence. Then, I felt his hand touch my cheek. I flinched, but the caress remained tender. My shoulders loosened the slightest bit. You can open your eyes. You can look at me, he whispered, still stroking the side of my cheek. His tone was gentle. Too gentle. Just the sound of his deep, rich voice made a shiver run down my spine. I didn't understand my body's reaction to him. It terrified me and made me feel out of control. Before I could stop them, several tears escaped my shut eyes and rolled down my face. Ah, baby, the king continued. He placed his forehead against mine and rubbed his nose against mine in a way that could only be described as lovingly. I tried not to flinch away. I did it again, didn't I? I scared you. I wasn't sure how to reply. Nothing was making any sense anymore. I was just so tired. Please don't cry. I hate that I keep making you cry, the king spoke softly. Of course, him telling me not to cry only made me cry harder. I couldn't help it. The terror of seeing him charge me in his wolf form still gripped my chest. It didn't even help that he was in human form now. I could feel his breath against my lips as he spoke. I'm sorry, my love. So sorry. I shouldn't have lost control of my wolf. He continued to nuzzle his nose against mine. Just try to breathe. Calm your heart. We stayed like that for a while. I was grateful for the silence he afforded me. It gave me time to recover my breathing, to calm my racing heart. He waited patiently, wiping away each one of the tears that fell from my eyes, leaving soft kisses against my chin and nose and cheek. The sparks we spoke of last night, the ones that developed anywhere he touched me, raced down my form with every gentle caress he left on me and seeped into every part of my being. Minutes passed before the king spoke again. Will you look at me now? He asked. Feeling too tired to fight, I let my eyes blink open. I was left awestruck by the face of the handsome man looking down at me with so much tenderness in his gaze. Tenderness I didn't deserve. Someone hurt you. His tone was still calm even if his words were partially spoken through his teeth. He let his fingers drift down to touch the bruise still forming on my neck. Someone thought they had the right to put their goddamn hands on you, and I wasn't there to protect you. I wanted to tell him that my punishment had less to do with his absence and more to do with my disobedience and insolence, but I kept my mouth shut. Tell me what happened. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I swallowed the thick ball in my throat, shame already making a home in my stomach. I was late for breakfast, Your Majesty. My voice was barely above a whisper. His frown made me want to curl into a ball and hide from the world. They punished you because you were late for breakfast? Are all pack members required to report to every meal? I slowly shook my head. Only the pack members who make the meals. His body became tenser with every word that came out of my mouth. So he shut his eyes as if what he was about to say caused him a great amount of frustration. You mean to tell me you were punished because you were late for a chore? Yet again, it wasn't a question. So I didn't answer. Is that why you left the room this morning? The king continued. Why yes, I responded. How did you get out of bed without me knowing? I didn't wake you up? My body deflated with relief. Finally, something I did right. I was so worried I was going to wake you up. You should have woken me up. That's why I'm confused. We're mates. I'm attuned to you. I should have felt it when you left me. But your scent was hours old by the time I woke up. I dropped my gaze. Not knowing how to respond, I found myself apologizing again. Sorry, Your Majesty. With 2 fingers under my chin, he gently tilted my head back up. I'm not mad. I haven't been mad at you a single time since I found you. I liked the way his thumb brushed over the skin of my cheek. I even found myself leaning into his touch the tiniest bit despite knowing that I shouldn't. The king was frowning while he studied me. Did you sleep at all last night? The answer was no. But I didn't want to tell him that. So I just stayed quiet. I'll take that as a no. The king sighed. I shouldn't have fallen asleep until I knew you were completely settled. His thumb swiped over the bag under my right eye. But it seems as though I enjoyed having my mate in my arms a little too much and couldn't help myself. I wanted to tell him I liked it too, even though I hadn't been able to fall asleep and still didn't believe I was his mate, but I kept my mouth shut. Claire Rose, the king muttered while he studied me. He smiled. It suits you. My ears perked up. There was that name again. Claire? I whispered. I was relieved to see his smile broaden. Yeah, baby. Claire. That's your name. I stared at him. 20. That was all it took for the king's perfect smile to turn sour. No, he snapped. I had to stop myself from flinching at the finality in his harsh tone. Your name is Claire. You will never be called 20 again. Do you understand me? I wasn't sure how to respond. I had no control over what people called me, and almost everyone in this pack knew me as 20. How was I supposed to stop them from calling me that? Would he punish me if they called me 20? I asked one of my pack members to do some research on you, and he found some old paperwork stored away, the king explained. Your name is Claire Rose. You're 20 years old. You've been here since you were 2. I blinked. Okay. The king's brows furrowed. Okay, he repeated. My eyes widened. Oh, okay, your majesty, I quickly corrected my mistake. No, sweetheart, that's not what I meant. He cupped my jaw. And I've already told you to call me Adrian, not your majesty. But that was yesterday, I said. The king nodded. Yes. You're right, I told you that yesterday, but everything that I said yesterday still applies today. Did you think it wouldn't? I thought you would have realized that I couldn't continue. Not what, the king prompted. Before I could lose my courage, I quickly said. Not your mate. The king sighed. He moved slowly, removing himself from me and leaning back on his legs. He reached his hand out for me, motioning for me to take it. With only a moment of hesitation, I did. The king pulled me up. And I shrieked in surprise. The king was naked. And I had looked right at it. Oh, my God, oh, my God, oh, my God. I squeezed my eyes shut and turned my head to the side. I am so sorry, I said quickly. I didn't realize I didn't know. The king chuckled. His laugh was so smooth and deep. I loved it. Baby girl, it's fine. His hand cupped my cheek and turned my face toward him. I still kept my eyes shut. You can open your eyes. I don't mind if you see me. My body is yours as your mate. Just like how yours is mine. I shook my head. Nope. 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 The king's thumb smoothed over my cheek. Please open your eyes. I can't, I said. You can't or you want tea? I swallowed. Both? I asked. I wished he would just put some clothes on. What would your mate? I quickly shut my mouth. The king growled. Finish that sentence, Claire. After years of not speaking to another human being, you would think I would be better at biting my tongue. What would your mate do to me if she knew that I had seen you naked? Another growl came from the king, louder than the last. Claire, open your eyes, he demanded. Now. Knowing I couldn't disobey, my eyes opened and met the king's deep blue ones. He was undoubtedly pissed. I refused to let my eyes travel down any further to avoid making contact with the one-eyed snake in between his legs. Can you hear me? The king asked. I hesitated. Yes? Are you sure? Do you understand what I'm saying right now? I nodded slowly. Yes. The king's brows rose in question. I'm not so sure about that. Did you understand me last night when I told you that you are my mate? My cheeks brightened, realizing where this was going. Yes. Then why do you continue to question it? He growled out. His hand gripped my waist as he abruptly jerked me towards his body, crashing my form into his hard chest. I gasped. His mouth brushed up against my ear. Do I need to prove it to you? I couldn't do anything but sit there panting. The hand that was on my waist drifted down until it smoothed over my thigh. It bunched up my dress and dragged it up until my bare skin was revealed. His large hand grabbed my hip and squeezed. Do you feel that? He asked, his breath fanning over my ear and cheek. His other hand gripped around the side of my neck. Do you feel our bond dancing between us? I wasn't sure what he was talking about. All I felt were those warm sparks that ran through my body every time the king touched me. It was his fire powers. I loved how they felt. Claire. His voice came out in a low warning. Answer me. No, I breathed out, squirming a bit against him. I was starting to feel hot. I don't feel it. The king pressed a kiss against my ear and I gasped. I felt his lips turn up in a smile. Why don't I believe you? A strange breathy noise escaped my lips when he left another kiss against my throat. What do you feel, baby? He whispered against my skin. Without my permission, my hands drifted up and gripped his arms. I sighed when he continued kissing along my neck. I tilted my head slightly, hoping it would encourage him to kiss closer to the spot where my neck met my shoulder. The spot suddenly felt like it was on fire and the only way to cool it was to put the king's mouth on it. You feel? The king coaxed, his lips never leaving my skin. I feel hot, I finished. The king chuckled. I'm sure you do. What else? I feel your powers. The king's lips paused and I nearly whimpered at the loss. He looked down at me. My powers? The heat in his gaze made me nervous. Yes. Your fire powers. I feel the sparks from your fire. The king's eyes lit with realization. The corners of his mouth tilted up. Those sparks have nothing to do with my powers, love. They don't? I asked hesitantly. The king shook his head. Slowly, he leaned forward and pressed a kiss to my cheek, then slowly moved down until his mouth was touching that spot where I had initially wanted it. My body exploded with sparks, causing my head to tilt on its own accord. I gasped and pushed my body closer to the king. You feel that? He murmured against the spot. You feel your body come alive when I touch the spot that will have my mark? A breathy moan came from my mouth. I nodded. He hummed in amusement. Does it feel good? His tongue dipped out to lick my skin and my back automatically arched, pressing my chest flat against his, my hand squeezing his huge shoulders. I didn't even care that he was naked or that I was touching him without his permission. The things he was doing to my neck at the moment completely destroyed my ability to think rationally. Why yes, I stammered. He kissed the spot he had just licked and smiled against my skin. That's because you're my mate. Your body knows me. It craves me. I absently nodded in agreement and decided there was nothing I enjoyed more than being held by the king even if I knew he was delusional for still insisting I was his mate. I wished it could have lasted forever but my stomach chose that exact moment to let out the loudest growl I had ever heard. The king froze. You haven't eaten today? He asked. I shook my head. Of course I hadn't eaten. I wouldn't be allowed to eat until tomorrow morning. And no, your majesty. He leaned back to look at me. You made the entire pack breakfast but didn't he get to eat any of it? His voice wasn't nearly as gentle as it had been moments ago. Why are you always messing everything up? Always doing something wrong. My head dropped with shame. Well yes, your majesty. Adrian, the king corrected. Then it's settled. What settled? Had he finally decided what my punishment was going to be? I squeaked when he suddenly scooped me up and stood, cradling me in his arms. He marched toward the door with a look of determination on his face. We're going to lunch. After dressing himself in casual slacks and a cream shirt, the king carried me to the dining hall, keeping my body close to his the entire time. We passed several pack members probably wondering what the hell was going on, but I was sure to keep my head down so no one would be able to see my face. If I was lucky, they might even think I was being punished by the king and not feel the need to punish me themselves. As he carried me, I was once again shocked by how gentle the king's hands were against my skin, never going near any part of me that was sore or still healing. It was like he knew what hurt and was doing his best to avoid it. Sparky tingles appeared everywhere he touched, causing delicious heat to travel from the top of my spine all the way down to my toes. I decided I didn't mind the king's hands on me so long as they remained tender. In fact, I rather enjoyed his touch. Probably more than was appropriate. He would probably shove me away from him and never touch me again if he knew how much I liked his arms around me. While the king's hands seemed so confident, I had no idea what to do with my own. My arms hung loosely at my sides and I leaned back to avoid pressing my chest against his. It was more than a little uncomfortable to keep this position, especially since it caused agonizing flames to ignite across my injured ribs, but there was no way he actually wanted me touching him. And I liked his touch too much to risk losing it when he discovered he hated mine. Claire? The king's quiet voice made me jump even as my body heated at the sound of that name on his lips. Ugh, I was a walking contradiction. Why was everything so confusing? Is something wrong? The king continued when I didn't immediately answer. His steps slowly came to a halt as he studied my face closely. I kept my head down out of habit. Wrong? I flinched when he raised a hand, thinking he was going to hit me for speaking, but relaxed when he gently lifted my chin until my gaze was meeting his. His dark blonde brows were drawn down in concern and it left me feeling unsettled. Are you uncomfortable? Am I hurting you? He asked. His gaze traveled down my form. I thought you would be okay until after lunch, but now I'm thinking I should bring you the pack doctor now. His voice trailed off as he thought through his options. My heart dropped at the suggestion. No, I wasn't allowed to go to the pack doctor. I would come out in worse shape than I was in now. I don't need the doctor, you're Ma Adrian. I'm sorry. The apology came out of my mouth before I remembered that he didn't like it when apologized over and over again. I snapped my mouth shut so it wouldn't happen again. Instead of getting upset though, the king tenderly brushed one of my curls from my face, still studying me as if I were a puzzle he needed to solve. But are you in pain? I struggled to come up with a response that would appease him. Yes, I was in pain. But I was always in pain. Pain was good, it reminded me of my place and my wrongdoings. I deserved my pain. But was that what he wanted to hear? What if he thought I was complaining if I admitted my ribs felt like they were on fire, my skull pounded as if broken in two, and every inch of my body ached with the need for sleep? In the past, it seemed to make him upset to hear about my pain. Could that be the case this time? I never wanted to upset him. Perhaps I should tell him I feel fine. Then I wouldn't be a burden to him. But what if he was asking to ensure that I was feeling pain because he knew it was what I deserved? Would he strike me if I told him I felt perfectly alright? Or would he know I was lying and punish me for being untruthful? Breathe, darling girl, the king's soothing voice yanked me back to reality. My eyes snapped back to his. Breathe. His tone deepened with a command. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until he said something. I was suddenly very aware of the way my lungs screamed for air. Following his orders, I forced oxygen through my nose, my chest expanding and my shoulders loosening. There we go. That's better. His sparky hand began caressing my face. You behave as though every question I ask you is some sort of trick. You're overthinking and causing yourself to panic. Shoot. He was right. I was doing that. I wasn't used to talking so much. I was nervous. So nervous. There is no right or wrong answer, he continued. All I ever want is your honesty. I only asked if I was hurting you because you're as stiff as a board in my arms. Are you uncomfortable? Oh. I swallowed. I just don't know what to do with my arms, I admitted softly, ducking my chin slightly. Or the rest of my body. I don't want you to have to touch me more than necessary. I'm worried about making you uncomfortable. I'm sorry. His eyes softened. My sweet mate, he sighed. He grabbed one of my hands and placed it against his cheek, kissing my palm while he held it there. My heart fluttered. I love your touch just as much as you love mine. Please touch me anytime, anywhere you want. Before I could respond or begin to process the way my body reacted to his words, his hand brushed my hair back and settled on the back of my neck. Lean your head against me like this. He led me forward until my cheek rested against his shoulder. Then he grabbed my arms and gently wrapped them around his neck. And put your arms here. Just breathe in my scent and try to relax. Let me worry about everything else. He held me tighter and pressed his lips to my temple as he spoke, making it hard for me not to squirm. That's all I need from you right now. Can you do that? Now that I knew what he expected of me, some of my tension disappeared from my muscles. I appreciated having a set of rules to follow. I yearned for his direction. Yes, I whispered, letting the sparks from his touch flow through me and calm me even more. I could probably fall asleep if I stayed like this for long enough. I can do that. His chest rumbled against mine with the sound of his satisfied wolf. Good. The king didn't put me down as we approached the huge wooden doors of the dining hall and my heart started to race once again. He didn't expect me to go in there with him, did he? I wasn't allowed in the dining hall after I finished making the packed breakfast. I wasn't worthy of being in the same place as werewolves while they ate. I would surely be beaten even if I had the king by my side, claiming me as his mate. They would find a way to punish me without the king finding out, especially since I was sure they would be able to see right through my lies and know that I was not the king's real mate. More likely than not, I was already in enough trouble for not doing my chores today and being late to make breakfast. If they found out I was also deceiving the king of werewolves, I didn't even want to think about how horrible my punishment would be. "You're stiff again," the king spoke, pausing only a few feet away from the grand double doors. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, thinking over what to say, then remembered he wanted me to tell the truth. "Should I wait out here for you?" Maybe he knew I wasn't allowed in the dining room and just forgot I was with him. Maybe he just needed a reminder. Or perhaps I could go do my chores or run some errands for you while you ate. I hoped he chose the second option. If any pack members saw me simply standing out here, doing nothing, I would be in huge trouble. And if Johnny or one of his friends found me out here, my stomach rolled at the thought. "And why would you do that?" he asked, his tone taking on a dangerous edge. I swallowed. "Tea, the pack is eating. I'm not allowed in the dining hall when the pack is eating." I kept my voice down and prayed that no one could hear me through the doors. "Why the hell not?" the king barked. There was no way the pack didn't hear it. They could probably sense his heightened emotions as well. Everyone knew I was upsetting him. "You're a failure." I don't know," I admitted truthfully. They get angry. "It is not my place." A moment of silence passed between us. Then, without warning, the king grabbed the bottom of my jaw and led my head forward until my forehead was pressed against his. I nearly choked on my intake of breath. His eyes bore into mine and I was certain he was seeing straight into my soul. "You are just as worthy as every single person in that room. You are just as deserving. Do you understand me?" He spoke slow and steady, his tone incredibly serious. "Lies." Yes, lying. "Lies, lies, lies. Do you understand me, Claire?" he repeated, demanding an answer. "Why yes," I whispered. I understood him. That didn't mean I believed him. "That's right. You're pathetic. Ugly and stupid." "Good," the king cut off my thoughts. He finally released my chin, caressing the skin he was just gripping. His voice softened. "I won't have you thinking anything else. My mate will know how perfect she is. Even if I have to remind her of that fact every minute of every day." "Perfect." I nearly laughed. "And I'm not letting you out of my sight again. Not after waking up this morning to find that you had snuck off. You have no idea how scared I was, knowing you were alone somewhere in this hellhole of a pack house without any protection. And then when I found you," he glared at the dark purple bruise wrapped around my neck left there by Johnny's hands. The king's eyes flashed black. "Never again. You're staying by my side until I say otherwise." "Yes, Alpha," I breathed out, too intimidated by the severeness in his voice to say anything else. Slowly, he let me slide down his body until my feet touched the ground, being sure to keep me pressed against him. He sighed and framed my face in between his huge hands. "I know you're nervous about how your pack will react to the news of our mate bond, but I will be with you the whole time. You don't have to worry. I want the whole world to know you're my mate. I want them to know how proud I am to call you mine." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly feeling like it was full of sawdust. I hadn't even considered the fact that he might announce our technically non-existent mating bond to the pack. This whole situation just got about 1,000 times more nerve-wracking. I didn't tell the king any of this, of course. My worries were not worth his time. Keeping his hand on the small of my back, the king led us both forward until his hand was on the handle of one of the doors leading to the dining hall. He looked down at me. "Are you ready?" he asked. No. I was the furthest thing from ready. I wished I could dig a hole in the ground and hide away from the world for the rest of my life. I felt in my very core that this would be the end. After seeing how his people reacted to the prospect of me being their queen, the king would finally realize I wasn't his mate. And that would be it. This fantasy would be over and I would be back in reality, living every day in fear. The king didn't wait for me to answer. I think he already knew the answer. "I'm right here," he reminded me. His hand rubbed my back, calming me a surprising amount. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." With that, he pushed the door open. The moment the king opened the double doors of the dining hall, Every pair of eyes swerved to look at us, the room turning eerily silent. If I had any food in my stomach, I surely would have thrown it all up. The dining hall was the biggest room in the pack house and by far the most impressive. Built over a century ago, it was meant to hold hundreds of werewolves during pack meals and celebrations, its thick stone walls and vast vaulted ceiling demonstrating my pack's immense wealth and power. Long, sturdy tables stretched across the hall in neat, parallel lines, their wooden surfaces scarred by countless feasts and banquets. Each table piled high with the contents of today's meal, mostly the meat of animals that members of the pack had hunted and roasted, as well as baskets of fresh bread, cooked potatoes and vegetables, and huge pots of steaming stew. At Alpha Rogan's request, the hall was filled to capacity today. Every pack member was required to attend all meals during the Alpha King's stay. It was a sign of respect to have everyone present. It also meant that every pack members were here to witness my insubordination. How many lashings do you think you'll receive for this? 20? 30? No, surely more than that. With a gasp, I dropped my chin to my chest, ensuring that I wouldn't accidentally meet the eyes of any of the pack members. Deep terror clawed at my chest, and I took a step back, my knees shaking. If I didn't die as a result of the punishment I would receive for stepping foot in this room during mealtime, I would surely die of a heart attack. Tension filled the air around us as all the werewolves turned toward us. Me, a lowly slave, standing next to the most powerful man in the world. As if I had any right to be in his presence at all. I didn't. I knew I didn't. I wished I could tell them that. It wasn't my choice to be here. All I ever wanted to do was stay in the shadows and follow the rules they laid out for me. Icy panic filled my lungs. Tears choked me. I wouldn't make it out of here alive, would I? Without warning, the king's furious voice boomed through the hall, shaking the whole room. What the hell are you all looking at? I flinched and took another step back, only to be stopped by the king's arm winding tightly around my waist. He rubbed at the spot right above my hip bone, being careful not to hurt my fractured ribs. His touch was a silent apology for scaring me. Conversation instantly started again, although it was quieter than before awkward. I didn't have to look up to know that every werewolf had tilted their head to the side, demonstrating their submission to the powerful man next to me. I followed suit and showed my pulse to the king. Not having everyone's eyes on me did little to calm my raging nerves. Neither did the king's hand rubbing my lower stomach. It felt more like a brand than a source of comfort. They probably think you're his whore with the way he's touching you, the voice in my head said with a snicker. Your body will be up for grabs now, just like Johnny said. You'll never be safe again. My insides curdled with fear, the back of my throat stinging with bile. You deserve this. You deserve everything bad coming to you, you disgusting, worthless. Breathe, the king spoke right next to my ear. His voice was low enough that no one else would hear. Or maybe they could. Werewolves have incredibly hearing. What did they think? Were they judging me? Deciding my next punishment? That was not a request, Claire. I need you to breathe. Following the king's order, I hauled air into my lungs. Cool oxygen flowed through me and cleared the impending darkness surrounding my vision. No wonder my chest felt like there was a 1,000,000-pound weight on it. I wasn't breathing. Good girl, the king praised me. Now, lift your head. Look them in the eye. My heart skittered. What? He wanted me to look up? Didn't he know I would be punished if I didn't fully submit to the members of the pack? I didn't deserve to look at them. When I didn't immediately do as he said, the king took a step in front of me, blocking me from view of the pack. He gently tucked 2 fingers under my chin. Head up, Claire, he repeated, his voice taking on a much softer tone. He nudged my chin up until my eyes were forced to meet his. He smiled, his blue eyes glittering. You are their queen. You bow to no one. Boy, was he in for one hell of a rude awakening when he found out how wrong he was. He didn't wait for me to respond. Instead, he pressed a lingering kiss to my forehead, one that caused a symphony of quiet gasps to ring throughout the hall, and then returned to my side. His hand moved from my waist to the back of my neck, where he squeezed softly. His hold on me was tender but firm. Unrelenting. He was giving me no other option but to keep my head up. Come on, beautiful, the king whispered. Let us go sit down before those shaky knees of yours give out. Keeping his hand on the back of my neck, the king gently nudged me forward between the long rows of people. I tried to keep my gaze on the floor ahead of me, so I didn't accidentally make eye contact with anyone. Every shaky step I took felt harder, like I was moving in agonizing slow motion, every breath nearly impossible to force into my lungs. It was as if my body had been dropped into a vat of thick tar. The king led me to the far end of the hall where there was a single table raised up on a dais, facing everyone else. It was reserved for the highest-ranking members of the pack, the Alpha, Beta, Luna, and so on. Behind the center of the table was a large chair, the biggest in the room, almost like a throne. Whereas every other table was lined with wooden benches, this chair sat alone and was made of hand-carved mahogany, with a leather seat and a tall back, towering over the other chairs at the higher ranking. It was meant to look imposing. Whoever sat in it was a person of power. The most respected in the hall. This was where Alpha Rogan sat. Today, however, it remained empty. It waited for the king. Alpha Rogan sat to the right of the chair, Beta Conan to the left. The king was expected to sit between the two of them, away from his own pack members to demonstrate respect and solidarity. My steps faltered right before we reached the steps to the dais. The king couldn't possibly expect me to go up there. As if he could read my mind, the king leaned down and whispered, "You're not sitting anywhere except by my side, beautiful mate." I squeaked as the king placed 2 hands beneath my armpits and lifted me over the steps up of the dais. He gently set me back on my feet once we reached the top. "I didn't want you to fall on your way up," he explained quietly. The quick kiss he pressed to my cheek was almost teasing, like he was trying to lighten my mood. "I'm surprised you made it this far with how much you're trembling." "Not much longer. I wouldn't be doing this unless it were absolutely necessary." I had no idea what that meant. Honestly, the king was the least of my concerns right now. My attention was on my pack's Alpha, Alpha Rogan, sitting only 5 feet away from me and the feeling of him glaring daggers into the side of my head. The hall was getting quiet again. People couldn't seem to look away from me and the king, even though they tried and failed to appear busy. I couldn't blame them. This entire scene was bizarre. I could feel their glares marring my skin. The terror racing through my veins combined with my lack of food and sleep made the room around me spin. I swayed on my feet. The king's grip on me tightened. The air suddenly whooshed around me. Less than a second later, I found myself on the other side of the table, in the king's arms once again. I blinked in shock. It was easy to forget the king was half vampire. He could move faster than anyone else in this room. Maybe in the world. I stumbled forward when the king finally set me back down on my feet again. Thankfully, his hands were back on me a second later, gripping my shoulders and settling me back against his thick body. I was grateful for the stabilization. It felt like my body was no longer my own, like I couldn't control my own movements. "Easy, sweetheart," he murmured against the back of my head. He was always finding some way to put his lips on me. "Remember to breathe, Claire." "Right. Breathe. Your Majesty." Alpha Rogan stood and greeted the king, paying me no attention. Thank God. I didn't dare look at his face. I was also sure to keep my head up as the king requested, too afraid to be chided by the king in front of the pack and add more to the already long list of wrongdoings. "It is an honor to." "I am in no mood for your pleasantries, Rogan," the king snapped, his tone filled with unexpected venom. "In fact, I do not wish to hear the sound of your voice again for the remainder of this meal." The hall went quiet. Alpha Rogan sputtered, shocked. "Your Majesty, I have done something to offend you." In less than a second, the king appeared mere inches in front of my Alpha, towering over him in height, breathing raggedly. The king's muscles grew with the presence of his wolf until they strained against the fabric of his shirt and pants. His fists balled at his sides, dark hair sprouting. Without the king keeping me stable, I stumbled back, my spine falling against the wall behind me. It took everything in me not to fall down to my knees in submission as the king's dominating fury filled the room. "You have done everything to offend me. You are lucky I don't end your pathetic life here and now, so that everyone in your pack may witness your shame." He paused. Alpha Rogan seemed to hold his breath. "But I am a merciful king." He peered down at him with dark, turbulent eyes, his voice lowering to a threatening whisper. "For now." With that, he pushed Alpha Rogan away, forcing him to stagger back several steps. "Sit back down, Rogan." Speak another word to me tonight, and I will have your tongue. Understand? Finally, I chanced to glance up. I had never seen my alpha look so petrified. He glanced at his pack members, who all watched the exchange with shocked faces, then back at the king. He nodded once. Before turning away, Alpha Rogan's gaze fell on me for a single second. I could be sworn his eyes narrowed just slightly with vicious intent. Then, slowly, he sunk back into his chair and then reached for his stein of beer with a noticeably unstable hand. The king approached me. He stepped in front of me once again, blocking my view of everyone. He cupped either of my neck with gentle hands and ran his thumbs over my jaw. I tried my hardest not to flinch, but I was sure he could feel the way I trembled under his touch. I'm sorry, my love. I promise I won't leave your side again. You're doing so well. This will all be over soon. I opened my mouth, knowing he expected a response, but all that came out were gasping breaths. Let us go sit down, the king asked. I had no other choice but to let him take my hand and usher me forward. Right next to the man who had just looked at me like he wanted to kill me. Without saying a word, the king pulled back his chair, getting ready to sit. I glanced around. There was only one empty seat at the table, the chair of the king. The king looked back at me. What is it? I shuffled nervously. You can speak, Claire, the king told me. You can always speak to me. Tell me what's wrong. I peeked at Alpha Rogan before opening my mouth. I'll stand while you take your meal, your majesty. My voice was so quiet, it would be a miracle if he heard me. Oh, or kneel at your side. Like hell you will. Next thing I knew, the king's hands were on my waist and my butt was on his lap as he lowered himself into his chair. I was sitting on the king's lap between the two men I feared the most in the world, in front of the pack who was surely plotting my death. I will be your seat, the king said. Tomorrow, I will ensure you have your chair at my side. Panic crept up my throat. My vision blurred. The king either didn't notice my malfunctioning body or chose to ignore it. Keeping a soothing on my legs, rubbing gently, he reached forward and began scooping potatoes onto his plate. His movements were casual, as if nothing about this situation was out of the ordinary. How are your ribs feeling, sweet girl? He asked as he reached for the chicken next. Do they hurt? Yes. They always hurt. Right now, they burned like they were covered in a million fire ants, chewing away at my bones. It didn't help that the king kept manhandling me without warning. But I had learned long ago to embrace the pain until I no longer noticed it. It was the only way to survive. You deserve the pain. Why yes, your majesty, I whispered. The king frowned. I'll give you something for the pain later today. He dropped his fork onto his plate and then let his fingers trace delicate lines around my throat. I tried not to shudder. How about your neck? My neck? Oh, he meant the marks from Johnny strangling me this morning. They weren't even that bad. I wasn't sure why he was asking about it. With soft hands, he encouraged me to tilt my head to the side so he could see the massive bruise in the shape of two hands that spanned over my throat. I was sure the entire pack could see the evidence of my shame now. The quiet purrs coming from his chest transformed into low, threatening growls that sent shivers down my spine. Remind me again how you got these bruises, the king said, his tone grave. My heart swooped. He wanted me to tell him in front of the entire pack? Maybe that was his plan all along. He wanted the pack to know everything wrong I'd done so that my punishment would be greater when he decided he didn't want me anymore and left me here at their mercy. Hey, this is Annie, the author of this book for a quick, hidden, anti-theft intervention. If you are reading this book on any other platform other than Wattpad or Inkit, it has been stolen. Please let me know. My Instagram handle is authorannywhipple and report this book on the platform you are reading it on. Thank you for helping me stop my work from being stolen so that I can keep writing it. Love you all. Okay, back to the real book now. I struggled to remember. My brain wasn't working anymore. Terror kept washing over me in waves, making my skin prickle and my head hazy. The only thing that prevented me from fainting was the adrenaline coursing through my body. I was late for making the pack's breakfast this morning, Your Majesty, I explained quietly. Guilt and shame made a home in my belly. I ducked my head, hoping that no one from the pack could hear my words. Because you were with me, the king stated. It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. You were late because you were with me and couldn't get away, and they fucking strangled you for it. Tears welled in my eyes. I'm sorry, Your Majesty. I made a mistake and it is unacceptable. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Tense silence hung in the air between us. Emile, the king suddenly called out. I jumped. His voice was deeper, much more menacing. Not the rumbling, comforting tone he usually used with me. A man at the table closest to us stood and approached. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with tan skin, long curly brown hair, and deep, soulful brown eyes. He wore a simple tunic of dark green wool and pants made of sturdy brown cloth, tucked into leather boots. A fur-lined cloak hung from his shoulders, clasped at his neck with a bronze pin of a wolf, the emblem of the royal family that symbolized his status. As if we needed proof of his status. He was Emile Guerra, the King's Delta. His third in command and head of his army. Power radiated from him. He was a sturdy man, wrapped in muscles and covered in scars from battle. Unlike the king, there was nothing elegant about him. He was rugged and hard and mean-looking. He must have spent a lot of time in his wolf form, as he seemed to be more animal than beast. Pack members tensed and tilted their heads as he passed, submitting to him. I even found myself sinking back against the king, even though the man behind me was meant to be the scarier one. The king automatically wrapped his arms around me and tucked me against him, his chest vibrating slightly with the sound of his soothing purrs. I'm here, my love, the king whispered to me. He left a quick kiss underneath my ear that had my heat scaling up the back of my neck. Alpha. Emile stopped a few feet in front of the dais and greeted the king with a subtle bow of his head. Do you have him? The king asked. Yes, Alpha. Emile nodded. We're holding him outside. Did he give you any trouble? The Delta's lips turned up in a cocky smirk. Nothing we couldn't handle. Good, the king grunted. Bring him in. Emile nodded and turned, walking to the doors of the dining hall. The king's nose skimmed over my hair, inhaling my scent, and his purrs grew louder. I can feel the terror radiating off of you, and yet, you're doing so well, Claire. My brave mate. His wolf seemed to growl in agreement, making his chest rumble even more against my back. He kissed the crown of my head. Just a little bit longer, and then I will ensure your every need is taken care of. But first, it is important you see what happens next. A second later, the double doors at the end of the hall opened, and Emile reappeared, this time with another man next to him. My spine straightened. The two of them held a barely conscious man between them, each gripping one of his forearms as they yanked him forward, dragging him into the throne room. The man moaned in pain, his feet dragging beneath him, blood dripping from his face as his head bobbed around like dead weight. The man was covered in fresh cuts and bruises. His clothes were torn and soaked in his blood. He was almost unrecognizable. Almost. Johnny. The broken man in front of me was Johnny, the same man who had strangled me this morning and threatened to use my body for his pleasure. My heart dropped to my toes, my pulse pounding like a drum in my ears. I felt the king smile against the back of my hair. When he spoke, his voice was low and ominous. It's time for your pack to discover the consequences of hurting my mate.